Hello, and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. Tonight, you'll be staying in room 185, Killers of the Flower Moon, the epic historical crime drama by Martin Scorsese. So go ahead, get comfortable, and throw on that Do Not Disturb sign as we discuss a truly massive film with Killers of the Flower Moon.
Well, our war hero has arrived. You made a good choice coming back here. Osage are the finest, wealthiest, and most beautiful people on God's earth. They outsmarted everybody. They have the say who gets the oil. Son, I got a question. You like women?
That's my weakness.
Well, we mix these families together, and that estate money flows the right direction. It'll come to us.
What's going on, all my cinema lovers, and thank you for checking back in. I'm your host, Gus, and as always with me is my co-host, Alvaro.
What's up, guys?
Before we get started, make sure you subscribe if you're listening on YouTube and follow us on whatever podcast platform you prefer. We're here to talk about a film that we were very, very excited about, along with many others. You know, when a master like Scorsese returns to drop a heater, you gotta go. It's part of it, right? Now that we've seen this, I can say that at least I really liked it a lot. I know you did too. But what were your levels of excitement for this movie leading up to it? Like, what were you expecting, really?
I guess the preface is pretty good. You understand what Scorsese means to, the art form. We always talk about kind of even in prior episodes what he's done for the art form, and also just how much he means it's because he's still alive. It's kind of similar to sports, where a lot of the heavy hitters that mean a lot to how, especially post 70s, when everything started getting more quote unquote creative, how much these certain directors, especially the brats, mean. But he's done a lot to actively always be involved, and he has no problem shouting out new directors. So the level of excitement for this movie, I think, was pretty similar to, I would say, Oppenheimer, where we were disappointed last year that it didn't come out. I remember we didn't have a date for a long time on this movie.
Oh yeah, it was pushed, right?
Yeah,
I think that was when we first started, and we did our 2022 anticipated episodes, like when the new year had started, the movies that we were looking forward to. I'm pretty sure this was there.
Dune 2.
Dune 2, Beau is Afraid at the time, right?
Yeah, Disappointment Boulevard.
Yeah, right. It was still Disappointment Boulevard.
So it was that episode. Like, I remember, because those would be two of the ones that, those movies were supposed to come out around the same time, and they got pushed. And obviously, Beau is Afraid came out in March, and then this one got pushed almost a whole year. So I do think it was similar to The Green Knight, that aspect. But Scorsese working with his favorite collaborator, Robert De Niro, and then it seems to be his latest, which has happened since Wolf of Wall Street, right? Or no, 3 times.
No,
right?
no, The Aviator.
Yeah, The Aviator.
First. This is the 6th time.
Where he's Howard Hughes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously it's just like, was this? Yeah, this is a Netflix movie. I was gonna say.
No, this is an Apple TV movie.
Oh, it's an Apple TV. Yeah. So it's kind of like when for The Irishman he got Joe Pesci. So it's just one of those things that you're like, if he's bringing, and when you hear him talk, you're like, if he's bringing out the heavy hitters for a movie now, it just feels like he's setting it up to be gold. So just to obviously answer the question, it was palpable, the excitement to this movie.
Not to get too far into it, but how much of the hype lived up for you?
I mean, I
it's a
feel
weird
like
way to talk about his movies, but it's podcast. It's the 21st century. This is how we talk about things, right?
Yeah. I think maybe it worked against it in this case, specifically for me, because I'm expecting my favorite movie of the year, possibly, or I'm expecting certain performances to be the reason why I'm looking forward to this. And while they still, obviously nothing here is bad at all, I did end up feeling disappointed, which I ended up thinking was weird to walk out feeling that way, which is where I sit with the movie.
Is that the last feeling you expected to feel?
Yeah, like I just couldn't really shake that. I was like, huh. Like I walked out and be like, there's nothing. Obviously, this is done to a like by a master, crafted. Like very few movies ever, honestly. But there was like just certain points in this movie where I just did feel disappointed, or I ended up feeling like I knew by the trailer what this was about, and this didn't like I knew where this was going 20 minutes in, and I kept expecting that it would change or something, and I didn't feel like that ever came. And then obviously we'll get down to other reasons why, but that was one of the main things for me was I did feel like based off the trailer I knew exactly what this was, and I walked away knowing like, oh, so it was exactly what I thought it was, which for any other movie I would not be happy with. Like usually I would not give them any leeway to be like, oh, this was like, if I know where this is going, be like, I feel like this is a dud for me, just because I'm like, I guess I don't see my like, the being able to see stuff like that I don't feel like I'm on top of that very much. So then when something is not predictable, what I was gonna say, but I feel like safe, I'm like, oh well, that's good. But I end up feeling like that's not my favorite type of movies.
I will say to your point, because I don't want to get into it too much, because this is a conversation for later on, once we're actually talking about the movie and the plot and all of that. But I really find it interesting that you feel this way about the movie, because I feel like some of the reasons why you may be disappointed in it are why I like it. And I do think I agree with you totally about 20 minutes in, or even just from the trailer. And also because this is, a piece of history that actually happened. You do know where this is going. And I like it for that reason, because you're grasping for air this whole 3 hours and 26 minutes, hoping that you're going to just get some kind of relief from what you just saw. And then you're not rewarded that at all. There is no reward for watching the movie. You know what I mean? Like, which I want to get into that more later, but that is one of the reasons I liked, I think, the same thing you disliked about the movie. And I also think it's interesting that a filmmaker like Martin Scorsese is able to like fire up this kind of discourse. You know what I mean? Like, this is actually a movie. Like, the fact that you feel disappointed about a movie that you still really liked is not something that happens very often with a movie that's like your average content that you just throw away. You know what I mean? Like, oh, whatever, it's 3 stars. But the fact that you actually have this feeling about it, like, I think that's actually really powerful, because I think that speaks to what Martin Scorsese always says, is like, this is art that can change your life. And and like, the fact that you felt that way is more compelling than just like some other movie that is about something that is not very serious. You know what I mean? Because like, this is a very serious subject. So I feel like almost like the first time when we were talking about this post seeing the movie, we were, sitting together for lunch and we were talking about it, and I almost felt like a sense of like anger from you, from like what, like that this movie like angered you because of like all of the things that are happening in it, right? And I do think that that's like the correct reaction to have, right? And it's like, that is not a common occurrence in most movies that you go to. It's like, I don't want to say it's like the point of the movie was to piss you off, but it's like, but god damn, if you have a soul, how can this not piss you off that this happened? You know what I mean? So it's like, well, it might not be like, it's like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost sounds like with a lot of people, it's like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen, but I'm still disappointed in what I saw. And I kind of think it isn't like so much on Scorsese as it is like the actual subject matter of the movie.
I guess he gets the benefit of the doubt, obviously, because of like the years of filmmaking, and that his intention, if you hear him talk, is always to be respectful. And you hear some of the people talk about who worked in the movie, and it's always about being respectful. So I think he gets that benefit of the doubt. I don't think he did anything to try to like undermine a lot of the pain that obviously the Osage felt. And if it came from another director that someone knew, I think you would invalidate that. You would be like, oh, it's because he's not very sensitive to the subject or whatever. But it's because we know him. We know how he's evolved with the storytelling. So I think he gets that benefit of the doubt.
There's a level of maturity with certain directors, and I do think it's not just because he's Martin Scorsese, he's one of the great directors of all time. I just think it's a level of maturity of that everything feels intentional past a certain point. When, you know, when Quentin Tarantino or Paul Thomas Anderson, Wes Anderson, whoever make their latest film, it all feels intentional. None of it feels like an accident. Like, I don't know, Reservoir Dogs or Mean Streets, you know? And it's like, there's that Orson Welles clip from a long time ago. Like, how did you do that in Citizen Kane? And it's like, because I was ignorant and I didn't know what you could do. So then anything is possible when you don't know what you're doing. But when a director is like in their 60s or 80s, there is no room for an accident, you know? And like, whether the intention works for you or doesn't work for you, there's no way that it is an accident, you know? Like, that's at least how I feel about a certain age of director upwards. Especially when they're like well regarded, you know?
Exactly. That makes, yeah, especially him. You know what I mean? It's, if there's anybody who understands the language of cinema, he's one of the, you know, not top 5, who knows, obviously up there, but it's, I guess in that same sentiment, I feel like what I was going to get at though too is that this is also a book, which again lends a material to another interpretation.
Yes.
And you know, we kind of talked about, we'll get into it more, but like the direction that you chose to go with this is not the direction of the book. And so then it kind of opens a discussion and be like, so you were able to change the point of view or where you wanted to start the story from. And there's obviously, like you said, this has opened a lot of discussion with people. And obviously it's intentional for him to want to do it from this point of view. And I think that's like where it's almost disappointing, because it's not that the movie is bad in its technicalities, because it's not in any way, but it's the way that this story to me ends up feeling very counterproductive to, like, for example, we'll get there too, like the ending of this movie. Like trying to cement that point doesn't make any sense to me when the whole movie, and like that's the disappointing aspects to me. But the actual movie looks like, you know, our movie theater experience, IMAX, you know, prime seats. There's no complaints with that, you know.
Yeah, like the actual look and technicality, all the craftsmanship involved in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it later about specific scenes and stuff like that. But yeah, just overall, I guess, about disappointment, that's more where it comes from, and you know, we'll dig in deeper as to specifics as we go along the story, I think.
Yeah, and then like another interesting thing about this movie, we'll get off this soon and start discussing just other aspects, but I do think that I've seen rare instances of this movie where people are criticizing it and also not being like, oh, but it's also very good. To be like, but I just have problems with it, you know? So it's like, it's one of those movies where it's like almost everybody agrees that it's good, but its discussion really comes from the point of views and the handling of the subject matter, and whether it was done correctly, or even if it was done correctly, was it done correctly enough to a certain extent, you know? And who is to make movies like this, and who should make movies like this. And I even think that that's another thing. It's like this movie is a catalyst for what comes after it, you know? Like, I was trying to think when I was watching this movie, like, what is another movie I could watch like this in preparation for this episode, where I could even like feel some kind of like lifeline to like, okay, look, like I've seen another movie similar to this. I haven't seen another movie like this from this point of view. So I do hope that this movie sparks that, and in the future we do get more movies like this, you know? And about this exact same subject. I mean, even Martin Scorsese said itself, it's like, I might not be the perfect person to tell this story, but I hope I'm not the only person to tell this story, or the many, many stories, you know, because this isn't the only one. It's like, this is a whole world that's unexplored, and hopefully he just popped the top off, and then here we go. Like, let's get more movies about these kinds of things, or just in general, these types of movies, like these long historical epics. Like, I, for one, between Oppenheimer and this, I'm like, these are like my two favorite movies. You know what I mean? And they're both extremely American, extremely long historical movies about the place we are. You know what I mean? Like, those both felt like extremely important movies because of the fact that like they're historical, you know?
No, yeah, I get you. That is what we had a discussion, I guess, prior that don't really know. I wouldn't know who really to ask, but in terms of the scope that a movie like this hits for an international audience, which obviously Martin Scorsese attracts. It's a very curious point, I think, that I've been sitting on.
For Oppenheimer, obviously, the nuclear bomb is a worldwide catastrophe that everyone who's alive at any given moment has to worry about the fact that that bomb exists, right? The genocide of the Native Americans is one of the most tragic things that's ever happened in human history, but how much do people care on the other side of the planet, right? And it's like that is where it becomes more interesting. It's because it's like if it's not taught in American schools, how often is it really taught in other places, right? And maybe I'm just ignorant, and it is taught truthfully in other places where they don't have a vested interest in saying the United States is the good guy, and these were just bad people that they had to take care of. You know, it's like I don't know. Maybe in other parts of the world they do tell the truth because there's no one holding them to lie. You know what I mean? Of like you have to uphold this great lie that the country was built on. So I don't know, but that is something. If anyone here who's listening is from anywhere else in the world, I would like to know what the level of interest is for a Martin Scorsese movie. I would imagine pretty high wherever they're cinephiles. But in terms of mainstream, is this a movie that would hit over there? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to someone like me. You know, you watch certain documentaries when you're in class, like, archaeology classes, where you kind of study culture and stuff like that, and you see how differently some cultures see the world. I find interest in that because, it's, as being an American, it's a very commercialized or a very unique aspect, at least. So, even when you dive back a little bit into movies like Come and See, which it's like, World War II or Belarusian territory, stuff that I would never know about. You're like, that's where the human element is still exactly the same. We're all humans, but they're pushed to different extremes where I don't know. Luckily, I don't think I'll ever be experiencing. And so then every movie kind of has that, I think, that connection, or why the reason I like them so much. And I can see why, for example, like a Japanese audience would be interested in watching how Native Americans got also screwed over by the same people they did, in terms of, I think there is that connection, but it is also one of those things where we brought it up and I have no way of knowing or checking that, being able to, obviously you could look at ticket sales and stuff like that, but I don't really think
we need sources. That's what I'm getting from this. We need Cub reporters all over the world, right? Checking in with the Grand Cinema Hotel, be like, my man in Tokyo, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give us the pulse on Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will say to your question about the international audience and stuff, I know that it is made. I will say this is an interesting thing about Martin Scorsese is that how the goalpost can be moved for somebody like him and Leonardo DiCaprio versus this is just the most polar opposite I could think of is something like Morbius, right? And it's like when Morbius makes $20 million, it's the greatest failure and it could kill the studio. But when a $200 million Martin Scorsese makes $44 million around the entire world, what a massive success, right? Like that a movie, but not that I'm gonna ever actually compare these two movies. I just think it's funny how it can be changed, right? Because narratives can be spun any way you want them to, and it's like I obviously agree with this narrative that it is impressive that a movie that is 3.5 hours long about one of the worst things that's ever happened in the world, and I obviously understand that's not going to be everybody's go-to on a Friday night, right? So it's a lot different than when any other movie of that stature would fail, because most likely that's going to be a movie that's about spectacle, and it's like you're expecting butts in seats because people explosion, but a movie like this, I don't know how many people you do expect. If they're not teaching this in history class, how many people do you think willingly want to go see this thing that they keep hearing is awful? You know what I mean? Hey, you're gonna feel like shit for 3.5 hours while you watch this. Do you want to do that?
I think the audience of this is the person who read the book, which is someone of his age. You know what I mean, or someone of an older age. And I did find interesting though. That's an anecdote that they said that about 35%, I think, of the sales here in the U.S. were people who were 35 and younger.
And so was Oppenheimer.
So that's not half. That'd be like, but that is a good majority. I think the other, but I would say the majority of the people this test to is the people when we were sitting in our IMAX screening watching this, which was, in Orange County, older, wider crowd. There was a couple people.
I mean, there was a group next to us of 3 young people who were probably similar or younger than us.
Yeah. So
there was a group of people behind us who was about the same age range. So, I mean, movies are meant to be seen by 4 quadrants of people. So it's like, young people, adults, old people, and kids is the 4th quadrant usually. But obviously, that's a whole other ball game. So there's really only 3, right? So it's like the people our age and younger, or teenagers to like 30 to 45, and then basically after 45 they view you as old, which is kind of fucked, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, you might as well be a senior citizen in our eyes now.
Yeah.
But I mean, Sean Fennessy put it best. He's like, the children, they yearn for good cinema because Oppenheimer, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, these are movies that are being seen by a lot of young people. So it does put a spin on the narrative that, oh, young people don't like movies. Young people don't care about quote unquote boring movies. Hey, they're out there, if you build it, they will come. I think it says more about the overall product, right? It's like it takes a Christopher Nolan, Martin Scorsese, a Greta Gerwig to get these people out of their seats and come see these movies. Quentin Tarantino, right? That's another huge box office name that that's a walking $100 million right there. You know what I mean? Like people are going to go see that movie. And it's like, we just don't have as many of those as maybe we did before, which is kind of the sad thing. And it's like, maybe it's not the talent level, right? It's got to be because some of our favorite directors, right? It's like they cook, but they're not mainstream successes yet, right? And it's like, you got to put that on the studio somewhat. And it's like, I don't know, I'll say Robert Eggers, right? Because it's a little easier to digest than Ari Aster is, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but Robert Eggers' next movie, I would expect it to it should take a massive leap after something like The Northman. You're like, okay, this seems like a movie that I think people would think is pretty rad, right? Yeah, it's like pretty artsy, but it's still something like Gladiator. You know what I mean? But I don't know what the next step is for the future of filmmaking to like event cinema that's like from a director that is going to give you a quality product. Like, I don't know. Denis Villeneuve is even there too, where you're like, really? Not Denis Villeneuve either? Like, you would think that he would be the guy. It's like, oh, he makes as much money as Christopher Nolan, but it's like, damn, really? Blade Runner and Dune? Like, we're talking like these things are barely breaking even, It's like, those are the dark times. You know what I mean? It's not so much the actual movies. It's just like the overall glumness that comes from like, fuck, if Dune can't make any money, how are the movies I actually want to see going to make any money, right?
Yeah, I think it's similar. This is a broader conversation, but it's similar to how we end up feeling about music, that there is no real superstars left. Obviously, there's people that have a heavy following, but it doesn't ever feel like they have a presence that can draw everybody in. Same way, I think, watching movies now, Steven Spielberg being considered artsy does make it seem like movies now are more of like what we're doing, which is a niche audience. International film festivals and all of those type of film festivals always draw in a certain amount of crowds. Or if they're general public, anybody can walk in. But I do think even in that aspect that the culture on its own has always kind of been a very select few. So I think in a world where attention span has kind of gone down, and that's not, a debate, it's just truth.
Real.
I just kind of think that it kind of put itself in the same way that theater did a long time ago, where yes, there's a crowd for all of these things, all of the movies, go to LA, watch any of the movies that came out. The directors there, all of the people there are my age and they care about that stuff. But that is the heaviest showing is going to have in the whole 2 weeks, 3 weeks that it's there, is the people that showed up for the preview day or the people that showed up opening weekend. The next 2 weeks of this, 3 weeks of this, it just bleeds, and that's it, you know. And it almost does feel even. People who really want to see it are gonna see it, and you know, this movie's obviously gonna be on Apple, later on. That's where I think movies like that end up having a very interesting story with me, because you never know who watched The Irishman. It's like you end
really,
up
right?
like you end up somebody who told you they watched it. Like you watched it because it got broken up into a series. So you know, it's like you never know who watched
did
it.
they actually?
Yeah, it was a four.
I know that was the meme, like how to watch The Irishman as a miniseries, but I didn't know if they actually did it.
I recall that they actually ended up breaking it up in that way. There was a way to watch it in that way.
Well, they did it with The Hateful Eight, so
yeah, I believe they did that.
It's not unforeseen territory. They've done this before.
I believe they did that with it as well, and you never know who'll watch it, you know. And the same thing is what I'm getting at. Colors of the Flower Moon. You'll never know who'll just pop it on, not knowing what this is about, and then you find out people get hit with the based on the true story, their attention turns on.
Hold up.
yeah. But kind of going back to getting it,
who are these people?
I do think that no director obviously has they're dying, and I think.
Wait, who's dying? Like the name
the directors,
director?
yeah, not a specific person, but that type of director, because even like you said, Denis Villeneuve, I guess, is one of the ones that seems like the youngest that has that feeling. Nothing comes from there. And
the youngest we have is Jordan Peele, honestly. Of like, he has broken through, of like, he's a popular guy because of, Jordan Peele made that movie. Oh, okay.
That's true.
The guy who made Get Out?
He is the
right?
he is
so
the youngest one.
And we'll see if Greta Gerwig, because like I have to ask like my I don't know. I gotta ask the ladies in my life who saw Barbie, like, do you know who directed that movie?
Yeah.
And it's like, you would think anyone who has half an interest in like movies besides just watching them would probably know, but then like most likely not, right? Like the average person. But everybody knows Christopher Nolan did Oppenheimer. Everybody knows that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, So it does seem now that because those directors are very, just like at the time they're going, there is nothing that really draws in just hype out of nowhere. It is always does seem like, there's this weird split sometimes, I feel like, where people do watch movies almost I don't even know how to get to the topic, but I guess it would be like to fit a certain type of persona. So I think like watching this type of movie almost doesn't fit that persona, and kind of what I'm getting at is because it like the Marvel versus Martin Scorsese thing, right? That exists.
Okay, yeah.
And it does seem like any of the negative this movie could get is because now they're seen as polar opposites, as before when we were talking about movies were made because they were just movies. So like a Martin Scorsese spectacle, and Apple treats it as such, is like, no, this movie is already, it's going to get nominated. It doesn't matter what it is, it's going to get nominated because it's Martin Scorsese. That's why they're putting all this money down. They don't care how much they lose for it.
He is maybe the last artist who is able to get that kind of money and like, I don't want to say blow it as in a bad way, but like he could burn $200 million of Apple's money and they could make 44 million only. And tomorrow they will be giving him 200 million more to make that movie because they believe in, not to like meat ride Apple or whatever, but it's like the people who are willing to pay this money, it's like they believe in what he's doing is of significant cultural value to art, not just movies, like they can even see past the idea of just profit. No. This is one of our last great American artists who we can actually fund and support while they're still alive. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, Quentin Tarantino was one of the other guys. Sony's like, yeah, $100 million. Here you go. You know what I mean? I
think it does come. I see it as like Apple has their evil. Like I do see it as an evil entity thing though, because I'm like, they want to check the box and be like, well, he made a movie with us.
Yeah.
Like he made a movie with, we can't be the evil corporation. Martin Scorsese made a movie with us. So it doesn't matter what he makes. It doesn't matter what David Fincher makes. It doesn't matter what, the director, like Roma, it doesn't matter what they make. It's Netflix wants to be able to tell you, when they're not a fucking company anymore, or years down the line, that, well, we made this. So that it's always like this branding is going to stay on to, you know, quote unquote, the elitist or whatever. Oh, yeah, well, we let Noah Baumbach make white noise. You know why? Because we waste money on other shit. And I don't necessarily think that it works for both ways. Like, you know, this film is able to be made exactly how Martin Scorsese wants it, because it also fits Apple's intentions to be like, look, we make real movies. We make, you know, Oscar-nominated movies. Winners, actually, right, with last year's.
Yeah, Coda, right?
So I just think it's like it is beneficial to them to just kind of like...
It is
like,
because they're stepping in and embarrassing an industry that is full of other studios that supposedly respect the art form, right? So it's like he left Warner Brothers after The Departed because they wanted him to keep Leonardo DiCaprio, or well, I guess spoilers, whatever. So go watch The Departed right here if you don't want to hear the ending of this. But they wanted to find a way to keep Leonardo DiCaprio's character alive so that they could have a spin-off series. And that was the last time he ever worked with Warner Brothers. You know, and it's like even them, the house that Stanley Kubrick, Christopher Nolan, right? In their Denis Villeneuve now is like, hey, I know you're making this gritty crime drama, but do you think we could maybe get like a couple sequels out of this or some spin-offs? And you have a telecommunications technology company like Apple, and they're like, you know, remember when you guys used to actually like go in on movies and do big spectacle events and like, look, we're going to show you how it's done, right? And it's like, that's what Prime thinks they're doing when they greenlight a $1 billion Lord of the Rings series, right? And it's like their intentions, the intentions are obviously not as pure as you would like them to be, but it's like there's no ethical capitalism, right? So what are you going to do, right? It is, I would say it does lean more on the good that they would give Martin Scorsese $200 million to make the movie that he wants because no one else is going to do that. So that's better than it not happening. But yeah, the ethical ramifications of the whole thing are like pretty scummy. Like you're two sides to a coin, right? Be like, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and I just say that, for example, for the same reason that anybody who does fit the demographic that watches movies knows that Martin Scorsese is a, you know, disciple. The same way you watch the commercial between him and Timothée Chalamet. Obviously, anybody in their position has immense respect for him, but it's the same way that people are hesitant to criticize the movie because of that same thing. And I just think in specifically how he talks about movies, you shouldn't be having that bias towards him. And I think when you try to take those lenses off, that's how I was like, no, I am disappointed in this movie, you know, but I do even think about even in that discourse that it ends up becoming like, no, well, you didn't get it. And it's kind of like, well, I don't think this man made a $232 million movie that's inaccessible. I don't see that, especially from him. You know, I don't think the story is inaccessible in any way. So it is kind of like like you said, an interesting situation with the movie that I don't know most directors would be able to stir now.
Yeah, I mean, how many people are making the main characters of their movie evil antagonist, right? That alone, and not evil antagonists with any redeeming qualities either, right? It's like he might flirt with one or two moments in the movie where you're like, oh, look, there's some of that Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro charm that I love from, you know, the slimy guys they play in his other movies, and then pull that rug from you. And it's like, no, like that's not what we're doing in this one, right? And then as to the idea of like, no, you don't get it. I would say I don't agree with like that for this movie. I don't think it's like I don't think that it is one of those movies where it's like, no, you don't get it. I do think that there is a vital discourse that's taking place on the aspect of like, no, I get it. And I don't like this answer. You know what I mean? And it's like, and that is okay. I would never tell you or anybody that, no, you don't understand the ending. It's that, I mean, obviously I have a different interpretation of it than you do, but I don't think that like mine is right and yours is wrong. You know, it's like, you can still not, you can get something and not like it. Like, I think a lot of people don't use that frame of reference when they judge things, you know? And it's like, how could you, if you're disappointed, then why did you rate it 4 stars? It's like, because it's really fucking good, right? And it's like, but it disappoints me, you know what I mean? And it's like you said, it's not. And for Martin Scorsese, from that aspect, I don't think it's like you have to take your lenses off and you judge him differently. It's just that he's of a certain level of filmmaking where you said it's like you could say that you're disappointed in this movie, but it still has some of the favorite like images that you've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like there's movies like that for me where it's like that's one of the best looking things I've ever seen, but it's not my favorite movie. You know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean,
It's like the joke that always goes around. It's like I'm disappointed in this Martin Scorsese movie. It's still the 10th best movie I've ever seen.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Or it's like when you're ranking his movies, you're like, 12th place, one of the best movies I've ever seen.
I mean that is like one of the we've had a discussion before with the rating system. It's like I think that's when I enjoy the rating system some more because like there's an established thing of what they mean to me, right? For example, like, yeah, I could really like something. There's things wrong with it, or I could see why people wouldn't like this, or this had its negative aspects for me. Then it's not a perfect movie, or it's not, it's whatever. The amount of like that ends up being like for me, being a way to later understand movies that I watch and how I feel about them based on how I feel about other movies. Those are the positives. Just like that's a side conversation, obviously, but there's like positives that I see in terms of even like discussion on something like Letterboxd, for example, or IMDb, where you can rank stuff. People who have a similar feeling about you try to find out: is it for the same reasonings? Is it for completely different reasons? Is it very fucking like just hater? Like this is a Marvel. Be like this movie was so fucking boring. So then you're kind of like, I think it ends up lending itself to a whole other discussion where you're like, oh, see, I'm not the only one that felt this way, or actually, I didn't even think about that, or stuff like that. And I think that's just side tangent in terms of because we brought up ratings, and like for this movie where I felt like all of the discussions of people that I ended up feeling like rated it the same as me were the same complaints. I was like, oh well, I don't know exactly where else I would really find that, you know. Found it interesting.
Are we the meme of 4-star flawed masterpiece, and it's the guy on the dark side of the bus, and then it's the guy on the happy side of the bus, and it's like 5-star flawed masterpiece?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh man. Okay, so to get into the movie a little more, so obviously directed by Martin Scorsese, 80 years old, 26th feature film, 16 documentaries, TV episodes, commercials, short films, you name it. The man has done it all. My favorite commercial is the Kodak one where he's wants to reshoot his nephew's birthday party because he didn't capture it correctly. So he's like, "It's your Uncle Marty. Do you want it?"
He's a little kid. Yeah,
he's like, oh, how could I have done this? Look at that. Angle's all wrong. Lighting's off, right? He's like, Timmy, it's your Uncle Marty. Do you want to have your 6th birthday party again? Yeah. Blue de Chanel, to hell with you. I'll take the Martin Scorsese Kodak commercial.
My favorite is still just him being in Shark Tales.
Oh, that's your favorite non-director Scorsese
yeah,
content?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'll give the TikToks a run for the money.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
They're pretty good. Ick, Slay, Yeah, they're pretty good stuff.
Any 80-year-old, right, being taught terms that a 11-year-old.
Dude, the TikTok of him talking to the dog, right? Thrilling stuff. I kind of wish he acted more in movies, that's funny that we're talking about that with this movie, but I do wish he was maybe in more movies because he is a hell of a screen presence himself. It's like he's got that distinct look with the eyebrows. It's got that voice. He's got that one of a kind laugh that when you hear it doesn't sound like anybody else. Right?
It's the guy.
Yeah, he's just like almost like his parents when he put them in his movies. Like I would like to see him as like a background character where like maybe you're not even supposed to know it's him. Kind of like Larry David in Seinfeld, where you're like he's in it a bunch but you don't actually know it.
Yeah.
So great stuff all around. No complaints about Martin Scorsese, the man, or any of his forms of art that he's given us.
Exactly.
May he live to be 1,000 years old. Written by Martin Scorsese and Eric Roth, based on the book of the same name by David Gran. The main difference is that this is more of a FBI novel. It's told through the perspective of Jesse Plemons' character, who at one point was going to be the main character of this movie. Well, not Jesse Plemons himself, but the character he plays. Yeah. Leonardo DiCaprio was going to be that character. Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, Martin Scorsese, they all agreed that it would be more interesting if the film was centered on Ernest because of this complicated call it love, don't call it love story that takes place throughout the film and is really at the heart of the whole thing. That was not his first intention. His first, originally he did want to make the David Grand book.
Almost close to book.
Yeah, close to the book, but then he realized that this would be maybe too similar to something he would do 25 years ago. It could maybe be misconstrued and not handled the right way to treat the Osage as way more of a backdrop than even they are in this version of the movie that we have, which is one of the complaints. And I will say, even though I think this is a 5-star flawed masterpiece, that is a tried and true complaint about this movie. I do not think that there is even enough Osage in this movie that is about them. It could be more. I'll save this for later, but yes, there could be more. There could be more Lily Gladstone. There could be more Osage, and why not? Right? If you're gonna make a movie 3.5 hours, why not? But at the same time, we did talk about intention, and I do think that there is a different intention here, almost religious, and I do think it has a lot to do with Scorsese's Catholic upbringing of like the guilt that you're supposed to feel in watching this movie. I do think that is one of the main intentions, more than like, let me shine a light on a beautiful culture and people and how they were robbed and whatever. And I don't want to say whatever because I don't want that sounds bad, talking about something so serious, but I do think there's more of this intention of like sitting with this evil and having to actually acknowledge it than there is of uplifting a culture. And I do think that is a valid complaint. Not that you need my validity, but I'm just saying, as someone in the 5-star camp, I do agree.
Yeah, I think based off just doing more research since we had that discussion, like what the book invokes and what the book does, and why the book is obviously even worth Martin Scorsese picking up and thinking I should make a $200 million movie about this. But it's just kind of looked into it a little more and just kind of found out that the book is obviously written to the point of view of the FBI agent. But I think that the most important thing that the book gets, that I ended up being like, because I do want to read this book now. I will say that that's always a really great thing. Same thing, There Will Be Blood. I'm like, I really want to read this book now. But is that, what's the Molly, right? Like, Molly is kind of surprised at the end of the book, or, in her real life, was surprised to find out that Ernest was the one behind all of this and really did love him. And so then that's why it kind of became very, like, it is very integral to know that somebody who has so many losses also was getting betrayed the whole time. And I did end up feeling like that was driven in this movie, but because it was taking in a different route, it's not like I ever felt like that betrayal was there for her character, because she identifies from the get-go that she knows that he's a coyote. And I'm sure she mentions that in the book. I don't think that's something Martin Scorsese just made up, but I do think that it ends up kind of being like, I don't think it's like, in the movie, I don't feel like she's duped or tricked. I almost feel like, or she's not duped because of love. I do end up feeling like she's duped based off of being like gaslit, honestly.
That's one of the things that was happening to her for sure. There's many awful awful things. How do you feel about spoilers on this? I know this is still very early, and this to me is this isn't not to disparage some of the other movies we've covered on here, but this isn't like a throwaway movie. Like, I feel like there is a lot of time for this movie, like where it will go on for a long time, the discussion. So do you want to spoil it? Do you not want to spoil it? Like, how far should we go into things?
I think obviously we probably could wait a little towards the end to try to, if there's anything, but if we could try to stay away, I think, from spoilers, because
you have to just experience this, right?
I have
to sell you on this movie.
If you're interested in it, and I think we could still get across what our issues were, what our favorite scenes are, without specifically spoiling.
The reason I wanted to bring that up, though, is because it's like you are right in the fact that, like, I don't think she was duped by love and like, oh wow, like, I actually thought he did love me. It's like she was smart enough to know that, like, yeah, he obviously wants my money, but that little like caveat is kind of like a a more of a marriage, how marriage used to be type of thing, you know, when marriage was more of like an exchange of like, what can you do for me, versus just like, oh my God, I actually love this person, I can't live without them, right? Like that didn't exist until what, like maybe even now, realistically, like maybe even now, after all the bad things people know about marriage, like they would still choose to do it is because they just really love that person that much. But like even back then, marriage was very different to what it was, to what it is now. So that, like, you know, as much as that could be a sign, it's like, oh look, he just wants you for your money. I think back then it was more of something to kind of like, you overlooked it, like it was kind of obvious, you know, and it was like, duh, you want to marry me, like I'm rich. But what I do think is that she was duped by the evil, where it's like, wow, like I knew he was a coyote, but like I didn't know he was a devil. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean to laugh when I say that, but it's just like, it makes me uncomfortable to think about like, wow, you really do think that you know someone. Like even, she even thought she knew the ugly side of him, but it's like, there's no depths to the evil that this person was capable of. You know what I mean? And like, there's many moments in the movie where he wants to like reassure you that like, oh, maybe he actually does. And it's like, this is what makes it so compelling to me that he uses Leonardo DiCaprio as the main character here. It's like there's these moments of silence and quiet where he has the chance to like turn to like he's sitting there with like, fuck, like I just hearing this, I know how wrong it is, but then when that decision is in front of him, the evil sets in, the devil on his shoulder, you know, and it's like he goes into the temptation, like he cannot be saved from himself and like the depths of his own like bastardness. You know what I mean?
I do love that money.
Yeah, like that, like I do love that money, you know. And it's like there's just no level to the greed and the like the evil there. And it's like, this is a man who's made many movies about this type of people, but I do honestly think that Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro is probably the most evil people they've ever played in movies, you know. Like I would say right up there with like Calvin Candy and Django Unchained, but it's like even him, he's meant to be played up in like an exploitative way where it's like this charming devilish slave owner, you know. And it's like there's none of that here. It's like he looks like fucking shit. He's an idiot. You know what I mean? Like he can be persuaded by anybody. Half the time he doesn't even understand what he's really doing. And it's like not in a way of like to discredit his choices, but like in a way where it's like he can't even think far enough ahead of what the thing he's doing, like how bad it really is, you know? And it's like Robert De Niro knows it, and that's what makes him so fucking evil. You know what I mean? But Leonardo DiCaprio gives off this like, oh, I'm just a dummy. You know what I mean? Like I can be told, I'll tell you whatever the truth is that they tell me to tell.
I listen to my uncle.
Yeah.
It is funny that he could be the worst, like they could be the worst characters in Scorsese movie when there's the people who persecuted Jesus, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh man,
I was just thinking about that. And they have the Romans.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, like we said though, he's covered many of these like travesties. You know what I mean? From many points of view, and it's like I do think for some people that they're never gonna get past the fact that Martin Scorsese makes movies about bad people. Like that just feels like. I feel like to some people that just feels like antithetical of like, why would you do that? You know, it's almost like I'll even give them a little more credit than the fact it's like just because he makes a movie about them doesn't mean he likes them. But it's like, I don't know. There is like, you have to kind of explore the evil the same way you explore the good, you know, because I think a lot of what Martin Scorsese does, and not in this movie, but in his other works where he's shown, you know, specifically like American greed and American evil and crime and stuff like that, is like how close that you are to like how close any person is to becoming like that. You know what I mean? It's like it's a beast within all of us that you have to like willingly choose to not give into every day.
It's yeah.
Because Jordan Belfort's life does look fun. You know what I mean? But it's like the part when he punched his wife in the gut and crashed his car high with his daughter is like, you need Martin Scorsese to tell you that that's not a good guy? You know what I mean? Like, brother, you have bigger problems if you don't know that, you know? It's like the movie shouldn't have to tell you that. And I don't know. They're not exactly movies that... They're not movies for adolescent minds, I guess, right? It's like... They are a more mature movie, you know, where it's like I don't know. Does he have to tell you that Jordan Belfort's a bad guy? Like, disclaimer, I don't like this guy. Same way like Oppenheimer. It's like, does Christopher Nolan really have to say like, yeah, as a complicated individual right there?
Yeah, it's
So it's like in this movie, to me, it's almost like he's like really cementing that home. Like, no, this is the evil. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's like I can think about a lot of movies I have seen where somebody's purely evil, and they are usually categorized right off the get go as horror movies, right? Or they're
That's true.
dramas,
Thrillers.
Yeah, so that's the big exception here is I think a lot of people. I will say I wanted to preface this. I guess like this is not a documentary, and a lot of the beef could be like that's not how it happened, but it's not a documentary. That's for sure. So you can't really judge it based off of it didn't happen that way or whatever.
Like every single thing, right?
Yeah, because I think a lot of the people, the negatives, I don't think it went down that way. But it's like, well, no, it didn't. He's not stating in any way this is the way that it went down. It's interpretation on a book that is also interpretation on stuff that happened that's probably not very well accounted for. Because guess what? Nobody cared. It's just like that is the driving point. Obviously, I don't think there's any spoilers. I think that's the driving point Martin Scorsese is trying to overlay here more than anything is that.
That is true. And that is one of the reasons it's like it hits so hard is because you know that no one cared.
Yeah.
Like no one was there there is no white savior, which is like a dumb thing I've seen people say. There's no savior at all. There's no happy ending to this. It's like almost like even though it's history, you're like, there's got to be something in this that's going to redeem something at the end, right? Or like maybe some kind of like whatever. You're like, and no, there's not. And like that is an interesting choice of like, it's almost like telling you to like, it's like, hey, grow up. Like this is how the world really is. You know what I mean?
It does come based off of like when directors make movies at a certain level. I think that their personal opinions or ways of seeing life are bled through the movie. And I think that people kind of cling on to thinking that every movie does that. And they do to a certain extent, though, to not like in different ways. Like, like one movie that I was thinking about, where someone's purely evil. Like when someone makes a movie like Neutron, for example, when it's about, the mass killer in Australia, it's like you're watching this movie and this kid is evil. Like it's born evil. It's almost his body doesn't even understand how else it would be to, react to these things. But again, movies like that are real because this person existed the same way that people have affinity for murder cases. It's not because it's like, damn, I wonder what that's like, and yes it is, I wonder what's that like, but in terms of almost being like, how do you get your mind there as somebody who I seek that I wouldn't call it pleasure, but that curiosity is pleased through watching a movie. But obviously their curiosity, because, and I do end up thinking it's because their brain is wired differently, comes through actually doing these acts of evil. This movie, one of their main, lines, can you spot the coyotes, right? In this
the
picture,
wolves, yeah.
you spot the wolves in this picture. And like, obviously it's saying that like the wolves are everywhere. They're animals. These are animals that we're looking at, and maybe they're not wired like us, so they don't think like us. They're not humans because, you're sympathetic as a human, and it doesn't seem like the race that's calling the other race very animalistic is animalistic in their own way. And I think that that's something that ends up bleeding through directors of this magnitude, tie into that. The same way, Blade Runner, my favorite movie, is that's what it's all about. These machines have this humanity, and I do end up thinking that while it's the dark side of stuff, it is part of these short lives that we as humans live. And there's just some people that are wired differently, and there's intrigue in that. And I think like based off of having movies that are based on characters that have non-redeemable qualities don't make me think the movie is automatically bad,
Yeah.
And this movie, it's not my I guess it'd be kind of my complaint because he chose to do this point of view, but it's not like I'm like, why did you write him that way? Because this person existed, so it's not like he wrote him in any way. These were the things that they did. It's just that my point of view is why highlight them at all. But I do think that that's some of the things that have been getting lost in discussion with Martin Scorsese in general. Like Why make why make Travis Bickle the same way that they're like, why do you make Patrick Bateman? But like, well, it's just an exploration of what I think being tapped into that dark world would be.
Yeah, and I think one of the important aspects of this movie and of all really good movies with really complicated characters is acknowledging that the characters are not one-sided. So it's like, yeah, you can be purely evil, right? And it's like, or maybe that's the wrong word to be using, right? It's like at your core, you're evil, right? But it's like, you can't tell me that Ernest doesn't love his uncle, that he doesn't love his children, that he doesn't love his brother. Like, so that it isn't that he's incapable of love, but it's that at his core, he is not filled with love. He's not filled with good. He is evil where it matters the most.
And humans are this,
and it's
right?
like, and like, this is an interesting thing too, is that like the Osage members that Martin Scorsese talked to told him like that needs to be addressed, that they did love each other. And like, no, it doesn't make any sense, because like, why would any of these relationships have ever made sense, right? Like in hindsight, you're like, why would a Native American marry a white man? Like, didn't they know? You know what I mean? It's like, no, like it's, and like, this is what we talked about earlier, like with the character of Molly, it's like, no, I knew, but I didn't know to what extent. Like it's an extent that feels animalistic, like you said, or like inhuman, and it's like, holy shit. Like it made sense to me that they wanted the land. It made sense to me that they wanted the money, but the fact that they want us to not exist, like that is a whole other level that like, how could you even begin to start comprehending that, right? It's like almost having a dignity for the villains in your life, right? It's like, wow, I gave them more credit than they even deserved.
I think they're like, this bleeds obviously again, because this is why this is a good movie. It's like martyrisms of liberalism is what I would call it, or martyrs of liberalism. Is that these little, because it's a true story, these moments of progress, people of martyrs for progress, like we have in the movie their mom just being like, you guys cursed us by marrying white men. Like she is so the same way that they're seeing them, that even Molly understands there's no progress in thinking this way. And these martyrs of like you being, open, a loving person, it is your consequence in some way, but she knows that it'll be her consequence. People who are like this exist in real life more the same way that people who will just do evil things to animals. These polar opposites exist. Molly understands that she's surrounded by evilness, and at one point that they're all all the sisters do, they all understand that, but there is this whole like, so my whole life I'm supposed to be skeptical, this whole life I'm supposed to be conservative, this whole life
that's no way to live a life.
And they're willing to sacrifice that to even at that extent. I think like the Osage in their head, the same way that we are as newer generations, and they're like, but why can't we all be together, thinking that it's possible to do it. So I don't think that her thinking that is a lot of people in history who have been, all the people who after they're like, slaves are wrong. Those a lot of those people died because they didn't agree with their opinion.
As awful as the world can be, there will always be a capacity for good and progress of like, no, yes, like we should welcome these people even under these horrible circumstances. We should still welcome these people, and it's like, because they're still people, and like hopefully they would return us the same grace and dignity, and like that should never go away, no matter how bad the world gets. Like that is what stops us from being the animals.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the idea, even if it's not true, the idea that it could be true is enough that's worth like holding on to,
And so like there in this movie exists the incredible, and in a lot of the great movies we like. I think that, to me, that's whenever that is addressed, and that theme is in all of the movies that are probably in my top 250, is specifically that theme of like these extremes that we go as to humans, but at the end of the day, we all want the same things. And
I took the same thing from The Big Lebowski. Huh?
Yeah. And it's like
that's what I thought when I watched it too.
But it them being the wolves, for example, just ends up being very, very, very driving force in this, because you find out how much the wolves are really willing to scheme at the cost of something that is insanely detrimental. Like we've talked about it in other films, and I do think it's just a very sensitive topic, but that like a whole race was erased. Tribes are completely gone that we've never heard of. And so this is just a small story of some more stuff that happened in the Osage, you know?
And what makes this so bad is that it isn't because of a righteous goodness of like, you know, we've always been sold the idea of like the savage, right?
Yeah.
And like that even feels awful to say, but like that, like, no, it was for the sake of progress. We had to get rid of these people because they were stopping progress, right? And isn't it good that we have the railroads and electricity and blah, blah, whatever, all the things that have happened post that, right? This movie doesn't do that. We are going to murder these people for their money. And there is no other way to look at it, you know? And it's like, that alone is like a gut punch because it's like, there is no redeeming factor of like the fake heroics, you know, of like, I don't know, if you watch a John Wayne movie and, you know, you're a patriot, you know, you're, oh, look, hey, it's the war and the Indians, you know, like, hey, what are you going to do, right? Like, no, this movie doesn't give you that option. And it's like, no, we're going to kill these people for their money. And then you just have to sit with that now for 3.5 hours, you know? And it's like, you hope for some bit of relief and it is not there. And it's like, I came home after the movie and I watched the trailer on Apple and it's like, it's already, boy, are they good with the marketing. The trailer already has like scenes in the movie that like weren't in the previous trailers, you know? So like the scene of Robert De Niro telling Leonardo DiCaprio, like, you need to get your house in order and all of that. And like the Osage, their time is over. And I don't know if you noticed, but a woman like audibly gasped when Robert De Niro said that in the theater. And, like, I think this lady must have been so taken aback by that because it was really unsettling, you know, because it's like, you know what's happening, but to just hear it, you know what I mean, is like, oh my God, like you really are sitting there the whole time just like, I can't believe what I'm seeing, you know, like, I don't know, maybe the propaganda and other type of movies, like where they make like the white savior slave movie or whatever, you know, like these other movies where they try to like whitewash history or make it seem not so bad. Maybe they've done such a good enough job of making us think like, oh, I guess I you know, that's how bad it was. And then it's like, no, you can't even imagine how bad it was. Right?
This lady it's funny, it's in the same theater, thought that in the past there also existed a white man who would have gotten up like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah. Hold up, this is wrong.
We need to, I'm going to talk to the manager about this.
And another thing, and like this goes to maybe your complaint a little bit, and it's like Martin Scorsese, I haven't seen him say this, but this is an opinion I've seen in a positive manner of the point of view. And it's like, he does this to really settle in, like to set into like, no, this is, I want to show you this evil. And if he was to do it through the perspective of the Osage, like there's a possibility that that gets lost because people, not just, you know, and not a certain type of people, when they watch movies tend to kind of try to find a way to connect with the character, no matter who it is, right? Fuck, when you watch Prey, you're like, no, I'm not some Native American girl in the Great Plains fighting an alien, but I can understand her plight. You know what I mean? And this movie, by putting it in the point of view of these evil men, is like, no. You're not on that side, so you don't get to pretend that you would understand what it's like. You know what I mean? Like, you're on this side, so you have to sit and like, it's only, I don't want to say it's like blaming people, like this is your history or whatever, but it's like, no. I don't want you to think for 1 second that these are like, oh, I relate with the good guys. You know what I mean? And it's like, we're going to sit here and I'm going to make you, rethink some things, you know?
I think
it's like not reimagining, but like bringing truth to the like Western mythos, you know, that maybe some people didn't have before.
It's similar to, you know, Steven Spielberg making Indiana Jones and personifying Indiana Jones as the American that comes in. This is the good guy. It's that is the fantasy, you know, of course, because that's his boy too.
I love that movie. We all love this movie.
That's like, because of that, you know, because like I did wish there was one guy who took care of like, in the same way people really love Inglourious Bastards, right? Like, God, I wish they would have shot him in the face like that.
Yeah,
know?
I wish that did happen.
I wish, you know, I wish this lady, or I wish, you know, this battalion existed and they would have just literally shot his face so many times it was unrecognizable. But history itself, humans itself, or, you know, and even in terms of that, like an historical aspect, like we're so easily manipulated that these things have happened in our past, and a lot of us haven't, or people didn't stand up and say anything. It took a very special people were willing to give up their lives to, you know what, we should probably die because people shouldn't be slaves, or, you know, etc. For not obviously not trying to justify war, but there is like this little like aspects in our history, at least as Americans, that have shown that we have been terribly wrong. You know, there's even like Asian encampment, same thing, right? Where it's like
that's something that we don't ever talk about. No one ever talks about.
To be like,
that,
oh,
right?
oops, sorry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we just had to be safe. But it's like you would think now in the era that we live in, you're like, but why would you assume? Why would you? What happened to, you know, innocent until proven guilty? Be like, those, we were animals. Guess what? Even up to 50 years ago, and now we still are. Except we try to hide it even more. And I think this movie is
and
like,
now some people actually, it's good. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean.
And I think this movie is like showing, you know, the wolves wear suits. The wolves have, you know, preference in the country. The wolves are scheming years fucking ahead. And
this is still going on today. The effects of this, of like, there's wealthy Oklahomans now, and it's because of the head rights that they received from their ancestors who did this not that long ago. Because this movie starts in the 20s. Interesting aspect about this movie is it never acknowledges the time frame, right? But it is over many, many years. Just like The Irishman and Wolf of Wall Street and some of his other movies lately, you know, it's like they really do they feel long because they are long, and it's because they're exploring someone's life or a long period of it, you know? It's like The Irishman's 3 hours long, 3.5 hours long, because it's about like 60 years of a dude's life. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
I will say,
sorry I didn't condense that into 45 minutes.
I will say that it was pretty cool to me that it has to be canon. And in this universe, Oppenheimer also did happen. Yeah,
the cinematic universe, right? American history, the cinematic universe.
I was like, Oklahoma, New Mexico, they're kind of close, very distinct things going on.
The Dust Bowl, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. We can have our American cinematic universe of American history, of things that actually
there
happened,
will be
that
blood.
are important, right? And then they all team up. Huh?
Yep.
The flower moon will return.
No country, old man. Yeah.
We must go to Oklahoma, huh? Oklahoma, shot of the flower moon flowers, huh?
It's Daniel Plainview walking in.
Hey, I could write this movie. I'll just make it a Marvel movie about American history that actually happened, right? Same tropes, same beats, everything. Anyways, not to get too off track here, but yeah, I was saying it feels long because it is long, and it's covering a lot of time, you know, and it's not. There's nothing to feel good about when you're watching this movie. But yeah, so let's get to distributed by Apple, Paramount. First movie with Apple, second movie with the streamer. I believe this is his 6th movie with Paramount. He's gone back and forth with them for a while. Edited by Thelma Schoonmaker. I always fumble that, how to say it. If you like or hate Martin Scorsese movies, she could be a big reason why, because she's integral to his career. She's been there since the beginning.
I will say,
go ahead.
I did feel like this one was chopped up a little weird.
Ooh,
like edited a little weird. Like I felt like the transitions in certain no, they didn't seem as smooth as I would think before in a Scorsese movie. It felt a little bit more harsh.
I mean, she was when I saw her interview for this with Letterboxd, she was using a walker, so not to be ageist, but you know, maybe that button's slipping a little.
I just, you know, again, very minimal things. I'm not thinking about anything that like, oh, this bugged me. I just felt like there was certain, obviously I have issues. I told you I did feel this movie was long, so I have issues with tempo. So I think that's what I'm talking about. I think the editing didn't make me really, even though I was obviously I was never bored in this movie. I will say that I did feel though that there were certain edits or length of scenes that I was like, does this need to be this long? But that's more on Martin wanting it that way. She's just hitting the button.
He talked about Beau is Afraid and Midsummer in terms of inspiring the pacing of the movie. These are 2 movies that we hold very dear to us, and they are also 2 movies that are long and want you to feel very bad, you know, about what you're seeing. So I do think that it's like And I do think it's intentional. Like we said, I don't think there's any accidents here with these types of things. But like you said, no matter the intention, the results will always vary per person. So maybe it didn't work for you as much. You're
I
like,
did find that funny just because he said that, but then I'm like, these two movies are shorter than the movie you're making, you know? So I was like, how do you really...
how much shorter is Beau is Afraid?
2:45, I believe, is Beau is Afraid.
No way, really? I thought that movie was 3 hours for sure.
I'm gonna make sure.
Let me see. Let me double check here. But I do think it's interesting that he.
Yeah, I mean, I did find that. That's actually an aspect I found that was really cool. I'm not gonna lie
that he is inspired by a younger
God, it's just Ari Aster could just retire, right? I mean,
yeah, we talked about
no one
this.
can.
That it's like what. There's no director alive or maybe even dead that maybe Stanley Kubrick, right? That you would.
Oh, I know.
Be so happy to get a compliment from or say that you inspired, and it's like a lot of the people you could think of, it's like Scorsese has inspired them even if he's their peer. So it's like there is no higher mountain to climb compliment wise, you know what I mean? Oh, the guy on Twitter doesn't like my movie. You know who does, bitch?
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I do think that.
Like, and you know who is right there giving him suggestions? He's seeing my shit and saying like, I should make movies like that, huh? Be like, the GOAT. Be like, so fuck off, maybe the internet, maybe what people say on Twitter isn't what the world actually thinks.
I mean, he's praised all three of his movies in different ways. So I think Martin Scorsese likes all of his movies a lot.
He's put the hand on him, huh? You're a made man. You're next.
Exactly.
That's great. So let's talk about our three leads here. Lily Gladstone. I want to put her first because, not to throw any shade at the movie, but it's like the movie doesn't put her first, even though a lot of the positives that I've seen about this movie try to say that, at a certain point, it shifts to becoming her story. And I don't find that to be true at all. That would be another one of my complaints. Not enough Lily Gladstone, especially it's hard to talk about her without spoilers, but it's like she is or should be the main character of this, and she's not. And that's a tough pill to swallow. I do think it's intentional, of course. I don't think it's like, he didn't know what to do. Like, no, I do think he I don't want to say he minimized her, but it's like, I don't know. I haven't had this complex of a feeling about a character in a really long time.
I just wanted to feel, for example, in Silence of the Lambs, weird movie to bring up, but that it was so strong, both of their performances, that you're like, I don't know which one is technically the lead here. I at least wanted that out of it. You know what I mean? Where you're like, she's the emotional, like the journey, the emotional journey is through her here. It's just that it's through his eyes, but I just thought that, what his eyes would see is more of what, and that is there to obviously to a certain extent. But I did end up feeling like, especially after, the FBI agents do turn out, it is Jesse Plemons and Leonardo DiCaprio's character more, which makes sense to me knowing that the book ends up coming from that perspective. But I never, that's obviously one of my biggest complaints is I never really felt like it let her hold on to the point of view for even a little bit, and I end up thinking that
and she's so fucking good in this movie.
I just mean, it's like, to me, it's where the tragedy lies in itself. I don't really want to, it's just, they're historic characters, so I understand, like, living in the perspective of the person who, like you said, is evil at the core, but still loves his family, loves what has come of it. Not trying to get into spoilers, but that is shown in a lot of moments. But I did end up feeling like the biggest loss here is her all the time. And I did end up feeling like those moments are just kind of seen as checkpoints to, now we're this much closer to getting the money. Now we're this much closer to getting the money. Now we're this much closer, which is how they ended up. I'm sure that's how they felt, right? And
Yeah.
but it's like, in terms of making the movie that way, is like, I thought there'd just be some more tug and pull in terms of, because they know that they did love each other so much, that there would be some more moments where she, I don't know, just more of it, like, more highlighted, or I do think there should have even been more moments between them two.
Yeah. So as much as I say that is a complaint, in terms of like logistically, and I know it's a movie, you can do whatever you want, right? But it's like, I do think with the intention of really highlighting the tragedy of her life, and like you said, like it even pulls through with like the lack of Lily Gladstone in some moments, like reflecting like the just how we see like even Martin Scorsese can tell this story. It's like you'd think she'd be the main character, and even in her own story, she's undercut, and it's like that is the story of the Native American, and that's why I think it's less disappointing, because it's like, well, I know you said like you could do anything, right? It's like, but like maybe like the moments like with her sister, like those moments where they're just talking, you know what I mean? Like nothing awful is happening, and you're just seeing these wonderful exchanges in the Osage language of her sisters and like what their everyday life is like, not only revolving around pain, like that may be where I think the biggest criticisms come from, right? And it's like, yes, this is a very painful story, but she doesn't get as many dimensions as he does give to Leonardo DiCaprio. You know what I mean? It's like she loves her family, she suffers greatly, and it's like you don't really get to see too much of the other stuff. And it's like obviously there is other stuff, right? But that's a choice to do that, right? And it's like I can understand that choice is not that satisfying.
I think there's a quote from him from a while ago, not that long ago, but it's just like in terms of
the cycle of the movie, the lifespan of the movie. She said it within the past few years, I'm guessing.
Though, no, I was just gonna say Martin Scorsese has said it, that like a lot of his intention behind making movies, like when he puts Robert De Niro into it, to try to spend as much time as he can with Robert De Niro. Mm-hmm. He's almost like saying like, I make these movies because I like kicking it with this fool. And it's like I do end up feeling like that's the approach that ended up bleeding here, was that like, well, I really want to work with these two a lot on this movie. So what is the perspective that I can give to work the most with them? And, Lily Gladstone, it's not that in any way he was like, oh, how do I use her the least? I just end up feeling like that bias towards him as a creator, which any person who's making something how they want, they're going to put the people they like working with the most and trust the most. I think it just ended up being like, it's because I know what I can get out of these two.
I would say, in spite of all of that, she still gives one of the best performances I've seen in a very, very long time.
Yeah,
she's amazing in this. And yeah, to your point, it's like, and Martin Scorsese, as much as you love him, is like he's not without faults. So it's like this could be a fault of his filmmaking or the movie, and it's like maybe in the time you shouldn't have like, oh, my boy is going to be the star of the show, and not to say that it's like, this is why this movie's bad and he's a bad director, but it's like, he's not without fault. And like, you can't ignore that either, like it does feel like a bias, right? Of like, well, how do I make this story about these two characters, even though they shouldn't be the two main characters in this thing? But what I will say though, is like, I don't want to say it's a cop out, but it's like, putting it in her perspective, right? If you try to make this movie, it's like, how do you tell this story in a way that like respects the truth? Because like the truth is not good. Like there's no getting around that, that like there is no way to bend this truth, because that would be even more disrespectful than making like an exploitation movie or something like that. Like, Spike Lee has always had a problem with Django Unchained because it's exploitative of this pain, and it's like, that didn't happen. So stop with your fucking fairy tale imagination of like, what if this guy was a gunslinger and went and killed all these slave owners? Like that didn't happen. So give us the respect and dignity of accepting what did happen, and it's like, Quentin Tarantino was a huge rewriter of history, right? And it's like, I guess everyone can kind of agree that it's like, or I sound ignorant saying that, but it's like, at least from my point of view and point of view of other people I've seen, it's like, it's highly satisfying to watch Hitler get shot in the face 1,000 times. So it's like, you kind of let that one slide, and it's like, yeah, it is better to imagine a world where Sharon Tate didn't get brutally murdered by Charles Manson's family of psychos, but it's like, I do think it's an even more mature touch of like, hey, I hate to break it to you, but there's no good ending to this. And it's like, maybe that is the way he operated. Obviously I can't speak for him, but at least for me, that's what it feels like. It's like, I don't know how you tell this story through their perspective. Like, and one of the advisors on the film, I believe his name is Chris Cote. He is Osage, and it's like Martin Scorsese at the end of the day is not the person to tell this story. So while it is good that he did, and this opens up the eyes and hopefully the doors to more movies being made, he's still not the right guy to make the movie because he is not, as much as he cares, he can still never truly like provide what the truth is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, especially talked about his upbringing, which is like, Catholic, and at the end of the day, he is obviously an older Italian white guy. So, and
Yeah, he's not white; he's Italian.
You could be as cognizant as you want, obviously open to it, but I do think there is certain topics that are insanely sensitive. But I mean, again, it's not like I end up feeling like this movie's disrespect. I don't feel that.
No.
It's disrespectful anyway, and I think that would be the ultimate like falter of a movie like this. So at least he is somebody you could trust that is going to treat this with care. I guess I didn't want to also say that in terms of, because we were talking about the performances, that I think that's where a lot of disappointment comes from me, is I did feel like Leonardo DiCaprio's character or his performance was the weakest, and obviously he's a lot of the screen time, so I did
really
kind of end up feeling like, I didn't.
Like, what don't you like about it, if you don't mind?
I just thought it was acted to like he's in a different movie. Like, I do think any moments where he was trying to show some type of emotion came off to me almost comical. I'm not going to say overacting, but it just seemed like the tone. I thought Rick Dalton was up there. Like, that's it to me. It felt like Rick Dalton was up there was in a movie, and I think that has a lot to do with me ending up feeling like, what am I supposed to feel for this character? Because in that sense, I never could really sit on that there was any conflict between him, or like you said, because early in the movie, it just seems like somebody who does what he's told to do by his uncle, but is also, a failure in terms of he had to come back here to try to carry out this plot with his uncle. So I ended up really feeling like, in what way did picking Leonardo DiCaprio for this role help? I did feel like it could have been anybody else, honestly. And I don't think I've ever felt that way about any of his performances. So I found that very surprising. I do think there's a lot of the joke, obviously, right? Like, the sad face he had on the whole time. Like, what is this supposed to, like, I don't understand that type of, I guess, approach that he made towards the movie. Like, it just, and the character never really sat well with me. Like, and the other two did. So I don't know.
Have you looked into if like this is a common complaint with others?
I have, yeah, it is. So that was one of the things, like,
because I mean, I don't feel that way at all, but I do find that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this I think a lot of the people that I feel similarly about the movie seem to find, like I said, it is too long, and Leonardo DiCaprio isn't that good in this role. And I think, sometimes for other movies, I'm like, really? But for this one, I did feel it. Like, I was like, I mean, it's not terrible, but I'm not feeling like this is up to par at all to what I would be expecting. And maybe it has to do with the subject matter for the character that he is. But yeah, I didn't feel like it was in any way like comparable to the other two, at least.
I find that interesting because I do think that the character itself falls in line with a lot of the type of characters he's been playing lately. I do think that Leonardo DiCaprio willingly made a choice after like a certain point in time of like, I'm going to ditch trying to be the traditional movie star and I'm going to do something more interesting. And like, he does play a lot of bad guys or like not necessarily good guys in his movies, right? So it's like The Wolf of Wall Street, obviously. Even in his last movie, which is, I'm pretty sure Don't Look Up is the last one, right? And it's like, I wouldn't say he's necessarily like a good guy in that movie. It's like he's got the right intention of bringing this to light, and like, God, why won't anybody pay attention? But it's like, he has been better served by playing like this, like, not bumbling idiot type, because like that's what he is in this, but it's it's almost like moronic, you know what I mean? Like I feel like Wolf of Wall Street really cemented it. It's like this evil guy who like thinks he's so smart but isn't really. You know what I mean? So I felt it's kind of more in line with what he's been doing lately. So like I thought it fit perfectly. And then as for like the Rick Dalton thing, it's like I do get that because like I just think that's like he pretty much did just carry that accent over, right? Like, but I don't know how much range he's supposed to have, right? Between like, hey man, maybe change your accent a little bit or whatever, so you're not sounding like the character you last played. But yeah, so I don't really know how to approach that one. And it's not like I feel like he needs defending, you know, of, oh, you're so wrong about this. I mean, that's what makes a movie subjective, obviously, right? It's like, as a big fan of Nicolas Cage, I can totally understand when people see the complete opposite of what you're seeing, you know? So it's like that makes sense to me, but that is not a complaint I have seen, honestly. I do find that interesting. But I will say that between Lily Gladstone's character and then our other lead here, Robert De Niro, who's just like, oh my God, this is why this is one of the greatest actors who's ever lived right here, you know? And it's like, well, yes, everything post pretty much 2000 has not been very kind to Robert De Niro. He can remind you that he's one of the greatest actors to ever live. And that is just, I can't think of things that are more true, you know, like about, there's some solid truths about film. Like, and that's one of them, that Robert De Niro is one of the great actors. And this performance, oh my God, is it fucking good. It's like the charming tenderness of that old grandpa, and then like the evil snake that he actually is. And then like the way that like he's more believable as maybe this is kind of helping your point a bit here, but it's like, I believed more that he actually loved these Osage people than Leonardo DiCaprio's character does. I think Leonardo DiCaprio loved his wife. You know, I believe that Ernest Burkhart loved Molly. I don't believe that he cared for the Osage people. I do believe that King Hale was able to portray that he did. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, I have an affinity for the Osage. I also don't mind murdering them all, you know? And it's like, that is I don't know if maybe he should have been like the actual main antagonist character, but there's like just not enough of him in this movie either. It's like, I kind of wish he was in it even more too, but you can't, like, you know, he's like the shark in Jaws though. It's like, you can't give too much, you know, you don't want to let it all out, like slow. And it's like, it's just so no depths to this man's evil, like how far he's willing to go, right? And then it's like, you think he's this cold, calculating villain, but then you will honestly see that it's like, and this is even really a gut punch for me, it's like, wow, it isn't that he's so cold and calculating, it's that no one fucking cares that he's doing this. You know what I mean? And like, that to me really like set in like this like cold feeling in my body, right? I was like, oh fuck. Like, it isn't that he's some mastermind, because he becomes very careless throughout the film.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, oh, can we start doing a little bit of spoilers here? Right. Like, I won't talk about specifics, but see, like, we go from like obscure poisoning to blowing up houses, right? And it's like, at one point another character tells him like, you're becoming much too obvious about this entire thing, right? Or there's a point where not only does he murder people for, you know, profit, he's also just a fucking schemer, right? And it's like arsony, insurance scams, right? And it's like that scene when he is crying over not receiving the insurance money over a man's body that he's technically in possession of was the ultimate just like petulant child. You know what I mean? It's like, this man is nothing more than a child with too much power and evil in his heart, you know?
It was similar to the scene. I think people found it pretty funny, and I think it is meant to be funny. It's the same sentiment, obviously, when it's, you know, one of the white guys talking about like, oh, if I sign this and I make them my kids and I kill them, I get their money, right? And it's kind of like
Scorsese's pitch black humor, like to the like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a funny line, right? But then when you really sit there with it, you're like, oh my God, this guy just said that I'll adopt these kids only if it's worth them dying.
If I can kill them immediately after, and I'll be legally be able to take their money, which is insane, right? But I think that's where the
most insane part is that it's true.
Yeah, it's like, obviously I don't know if somebody phrased it that way, was that bold about it, but it's what you said. It ends up being like, it's because nobody cared. So even the lawyer would be like, you know what? Yes, if you do that, yes, Are you gonna pay me? You know what I mean? It ended up being like, if I kill this dog right now, will you give me $1 million? Like, yes. And then that's the way that they saw it, and that's not funny because it happened, but it is in the context of this movie because it's just
so
ridiculous.
Uncomfortable because you're like, I can't believe I just heard that, right?
Yeah, and also it's again like because you still are watching an entertainment that again this was willingly put in in the scene, and it's supposed to in a way hit you home the same way Doctor Strangelove is when he's riding the fucking bomb, and doing it, like he's riding in a rodeo. Like, yes,
yeah, it's funny that the world is ending like that, right?
But it's also that's what humans are. Humans will do the most stupid, prideful things in the face of death or whatever because they still think that it's gonna bleed into the next life or whatever. And I think at the end of the day, dark humor like that is, again, very. It's just willing. It's supposed to give you a reaction, and I do think that is effective in that way, and
because it just shows you like the callousness and the carelessness of these people, of like, I don't really feel one way or another, but bring money into it. Oh, kill him. Yeah, kill them. Like, easy.
Ultimately, I did just end up feeling needed more De Niro and driving goggles, right?
That was good stuff there. Nice costume touch there. So there's other things about the film, obviously. Like I did want to talk about like the cinematography. I thought was just fucking masterful work here. Rodrigo Prieto, Mexican cinematographer, shout out. Known for his work with Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. He's done a few movies, he's done more than a few movies, but highly regarded cinematographer. Has worked with Scorsese since The Wolf of Wall Street, exclusively as his cinematographer. Some of the shots in this movie are just like some of the most beautiful paintings I've ever seen, and it's like, I can think of, one camera movement specifically. It's a tracking shot I'll never forget is when Ernest comes home to the farm and it's like circling around him, going through the whole entire house, right? I just was like, it's those kind of things where you're like, it's good when you watch a Martin Scorsese film and then you're reminded, you're like, I'm in a master's hands. You know what I mean? And I thought that way too, like instantly with the opening shot of like the peace pipe burial ceremony, just the opening shot of like that pipe and the hands, and I'm like, though that right there is like, that's the power of cinema right there. Like that could be a painting, but this is just somehow, in my opinion, more beautiful, and it's like, that's why we do this. Cause like, look at that, and then also the other one for me, that's real, like, I'll never forget seeing this is the burning of the ranch for the insurance money of like, I don't think I've ever seen a better version of like hell on screen. You know what I mean? It looked like water that was on fire, and not like the surface, but like the actual like molecules of the water were fire. You know what I mean? Like if fire had taken the shape and properties of water, like it was unlike anything I've ever seen. It was just really, really masterful work on display the entire film. And like, I guess that could kind of sound obvious in a Scorsese movie, but it's like, I wanted to acknowledge how great this movie looked.
Yeah, they gave him a lot of, I would say, limiting things that are obvious in terms of budget that Apple gives them, and then they gave the old man the resources. Is a lot of the shots, I think, to show the land. There's a lot of drone shots here, and they kind of show these vast areas and spaces, and I think that is already being able to understand, again, the language of cinema, the same way that, when they made the Lord of the Rings movies, they give you those type of shots so you could really become connected with this world. Like, we're entering a new world.
And the scope of it, how big the world really is.
And I did feel
Lord
that
of the Rings
way.
is a great movie in doing that, of like, look how big the world is.
And I did feel like in this world, like when Ernest is driving in for the first time, so you could see how rich the Osage are and why they're rich and all of these things. Like, I did feel like all of those shots cemented that very well. I will say something I wanted to bring up. I guess it's not really like a spoiler. I don't think it's too integral, but I did find it really interesting, the evil here being connected with like the KKK, because I just didn't expect that whatsoever.
Oh, to see them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was like a little like it's a good thing, right, that I didn't see that coming, but I think that's like that's when it becomes, in case your media literacy was off, right, on what
Yeah.
kind of people these are.
Ex-
Yeah,
just in
but-
case, I don't know. Yeah. And to speak on the media literacy thing for a second, I do think that he didn't want anything to be misconstrued about this movie of like even the people who are supposed like you would think would maybe be like complicit in the whole thing, and it's like no, you're fucking evil too. You know what I mean? Because it's like you said, it's like it's almost like you wish someone would stand up and be like, this is fucking wrong. And it's like that's what makes it so evil, is that it's like no one sees what they're doing is even wrong. It's almost like a God-given right to be doing what they're doing, you know? And it's like that's like the great American evil, right? And like not just American evil, but like the evil of power, of like this idea that like what you're doing is the right thing to be doing. And not only are you doing the right thing, but it's like for everyone it's the right thing, not just for yourself, you know? And it's like that's what really is scary, is like the idea of this violence in the name of progress, you know?
yeah.
And like I do think one of the KKK is one of those things that like no poof like kind of snap you into reality for a second, because that's a very real thing still to this day. And like maybe that's why it was so shocking to you, you know, because you're like, oh God. Like,
Oh, these guys, huh?
yeah,
Their
great.
establishment.
These guys again, these guys stink.
Like the FBI would have barely started to be around. These guys were already around.
They got the KKK, who knows how long their head start is on the FBI, right? And then the other thing too, and it's like about this like complacency with like how these things went down, is like when they go to Washington DC, right? And it's like they meet the president. She tells them what's going on. He's like, thank you. That's it. The FBI, they were made aware of this before. It took $20,000 for them to care. So it's like even the people that you would think in terms of like, well, it's their job to solve this crime, right? It's like they don't really care. They're only there because they got paid to do it. And it's like, this is a major spoiler, so I don't want to say to who and what effect, but it's like even the doctors are fucking poisoning people in this town. Who can you turn to? There's no one to turn to. And it's like, that's what makes it so frustrating, honestly. And like, I think like when the movie's this long and you have time to just like sit with that, like it does anger you. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God. Oh, they brought in a private investigator who could fucking, who's unbiased in the whole thing. Boom, he's gone. You know what I mean? It's like, it's too easy. You know what I mean? It's like, there's nothing they could do. It's like, it not only is it not a fair fight, it's like I'm not even going to allow you to fight back. And like that is one of the things that's like it felt so relevant to like what's happening in the world now, like with Gaza and stuff like that, right? And it's like I'm not even going to offer you the decency of a chance to fight back. So there's that. You know what I mean? And like that felt really like contemporary to me, honestly, that I was like, geez, this just goes to show you that these are like evils that will never go away as long as there is like a need for power, you know, like from one group over another.
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially on the sentiment. I think, again, why he's a great director, you know, being able to apply those feelings. And because I think that's why, again, any interest to any story, most people have them because they feel emotion towards them, whether it's happiness or fear or, you know, just intrigue of any way. It's usually because it ends up connecting to some type of emotion that is, you know, all of us can relate to.
And not to get off the performers yet, because I think we should bring up the fact that there was like Osage and Native American cast members in this movie, and a lot of them are fantastic. And it's like the sad truth about it is that like this was like a last call for a lot of people, where it's like this saved their acting career. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's like a sad truth about this thing too. And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe Martin Scorsese's not the right guy to tell this movie, but like, look, no one is telling not only this movie, any of these stories. And these actors have nowhere to go because people don't want to put them in movies. Like, for one, as just regular people for the most part, you know, it's like, not just because you're a native doesn't mean that the story has to be about native people. You know what I mean? It's like, are we still like, this is how far behind we are. Like, for all the progress that has been made in the past decade for like diversity and stuff like that, this goes to show you too, like just how far behind we still really are in terms of like being anywhere close to even like a solid baseline, you know? And it's like, why do none of these native actors have nothing to work on? Because there's no native movies. Well, why do they only have to be in native movies? And it's like, that's a question I don't want to answer. You know what I mean? Like that. It's like, do you want to know the truth? Do you want to know the truth? Right? And it's like, that is very meta about this movie and like the truth of like how it works now still, you know?
That's exactly.
So I did want to say that they were wonderful in this movie. I'm not going to pretend I know all of their names because, you know, a lot of these people are either actors who have not been in a lot or they're not even actors. But I will say one really stuck out to me. And once I heard his story, I was like, that is just that. I don't even know what to say. It's like, I don't know what to say about it, but it's like, that is something. Is that the man who is when they're in like the ceremonial like hut deciding like, what are we going to do? Like, in the old days, we would have used to kill these people, but like we don't live in the old days anymore. And like, yes, times are civilized. Like, what do we do? Right? That man's grandfather was murdered during this time. So it's like, that is like some powerful shit right there, you know, to like hear somebody who it's like, yeah, he's acting in a movie, but it's like those words couldn't be any more from the heart. You know what I mean? Or like you couldn't get a better person to convey the tragedy of this because this person has experienced this through their own like family line, you know? And it's like, that was just really powerful stuff to me. And it's like, not to be too like whatever, like emotional about the thing, but it's just like, that's not something you can get in any movie, you know? And I'm not saying that just because it's Martin Scorsese, but it's like as a powerful subject to make a movie about. So sometimes some real life things can poke through that are just like really potent, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's just certain topics that are very real. You know, there's same thing in a movie like Schindler's List, right? You find out if I don't know if I'm sure there might be, but there's people in that movie who also their family was, you know, in some way killed in World War II.
Yeah, the people at the end, the line of people at the end.
So it's like it's the same thing because these things are real.
It's like, that's powerful shit.
Real
Dude.
tragedy.
Like,
Yeah,
I know people could say, "Oh, it's cliche" or whatever negativity you want to throw on it. Be like, I don't see that at all, you know. And it's like, that's one of the great things that movies can do.
Yeah, no,
Like, snap you into reality for a second. And it's like, I know we're here to have fun and watch a movie, but like, this is more serious than that.
Yeah, I mean, those older directors, greater directors, I think, understand that to a different degree, just based off how stories were told to them, you know, orally, or theme, like, you know, older stories always having that. What is the central theme of this story?
So before we finish this, let's talk about like, let's make sure we really get those complaints out, right? Because I don't want to make it seem like we forgot about them or anything. But we talked about the pacing, right? That was one of them. For you, it's too long, right?
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio's performance, right? The point of view, right? So do you feel like you talked about that enough, or do you have anything else you really want to say about maybe what you didn't like about the movie, or what made it so frustrating for you?
I think I touched it up pretty well on that. I did feel like it'd be more Lily Gladstone.
More love, less hate. A peace and love, baby.
Yeah, I did end up feeling like for a general sense, I didn't feel like I ended up thinking about the Osage as much as I liked them. Like, I thought every coolest aspect of this movie regarded them. So I
like their life and their culture and their stories.
Yeah,
and
that could be as easy as like, because I have no exposure to it whatsoever. So it's like anytime I see this anywhere, I'm like, this is so cool to me. And then in terms of just ended up being like, I do think there's like a different point of view, which would have been from Molly, that I would have appreciated more, or would have thought they would delivered more strongly on in terms of showing the guilt, the pain, you know, just straight up injustices that as the Osage felt, but and it ends up coming down to, like I said, perspective of who reads the book and what they think is, he's the one making the movie, you know, he's the one that gets the $200 million to make the movie, he's gonna make it how he wants to make it. So that's just, I do think I've kind of touched upon that as much as I would. Leonardo DiCaprio's acting, obviously, just not to my liking as much as I wanted. Wouldn't say terrible, but I did find in some pieces where I just couldn't really sit with the character too much. Yeah, I did think it was too long. Like I said, the pacing.
Do you find it to be too long because the ending is unsatisfying to you?
No, I do think that it's like a lot of the repeated things of like where I feel like, because okay, so like I think this movie starts off really good, and the first act of this movie is just, yeah, it's up there for me. But then the middle of the whole movie, I just felt like it just dragged, honestly. And then when it ends the way that it ends, I do end up feeling like, so the whole point, like this whole hour and a half, 2 hours, I would say almost, is just like Ernest loses his shit. You know what I mean? Like, or just Ernest isn't a man. Like, it's just like this whole thing ends up being very like, we've talked about how Wes Anderson learned after after Bottle Rocket, certain things could just literally take up a minute or something, and then to see the complete polar opposite being done on screen here, but then to see it capped off and to comment on what it comments, and then just kind of minimize certain aspects of the story. I just kind of like, what made you think that this whole middle part of showing?
By the middle part, do you mean like basically all the genociding, like the dismantling of the family?
I would say that like it's the fact that it took like, okay, one by one we're gonna talk about how each one is getting screwed over here, and then also I think it does have to do more with like they took a car for the insurance money, right? The insurance money on the other dead Native American. I don't know why the whole aspect of this movie was to keep calling them Indian. Maybe it's to further solidify that they didn't even have the respect to call them Native Americans. But I did find that
back then that word did not exist really,
and so I did find that like kind of, that's a choice to me, because it's like yes, they didn't call them Native Americans, but we know now that they weren't Indians. But I guess it would be the same way when you watch certain movies and they just keep referring to black people as the N-word, right? So sure, that's something we could go with. I don't necessarily think, again, just kind of gets old after a while.
So I find that interesting because we are introduced to the fact that there's probably about like, well, in this, let's say this specific story, right? Not the surrounding towns, whatever. Like this story, Molly knew at least 30 people who were murdered, right? And yeah, it's one by one and slow and methodical, but we only get to see the dismantling of her family, really, and like maybe one or two other people who are connected. And that's the surface. So it's like this part to you that's dragging is barely the surface of what actually happened. You know what I mean? So it's like I talked to somebody after the movie. We were messaging back and forth on Instagram. It's an old friend of mine. And he was saying, he was like, I couldn't remember if they only covered her family. And like, if they didn't, why didn't they discuss the other people who were like, how they were killed too? Because it's like the movie has a lot of montages of these people who were laying there like dead and like explaining supposedly how they were killed, right? A lot of it is like foul play, honestly, right? Like, or it's foul play, but it's not presented that way, right? And it's these very slow shots of these people sitting there, and like I think handled with dignity. It's like how he shows dead people versus how he may have in the early 90s or 80s, you know, like that's a big thing. And the maturity of Scorsese is like how the violence is done, right? It isn't these kinetic, fast-paced, tight angles, like ultra violence, you know what I mean? Like a lot of the shots in this movie, like Thelma Schoonmaker commented on, are wide shots of like it's like a perspective from far away of like you need to see this not as one of the characters. Like maybe in Goodfellas you're supposed to feel like Henry Hill, you know, and like that's why the movie feels like cocaine at one point. You know what I mean? It's like to make you feel like him, but this movie isn't trying to make you feel like him. It's trying to make you observe what it is like as an outsider. Yeah, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but just the difference in the violence of like how he conveys it now and how he used to. And like I think the reason it drags for one is like to really like hammer that point home. And it's like maybe to your point here, it's like it isn't a point that like needs much hammering. You know what I mean? Because it's like I realize, and like you think anybody with the heart would realize like how like the injustice that is taking place here, right? So it's like almost like not an overkill, but like I don't know. It doesn't feel good. I will say that. Like nothing in this movie to me feels good.
Because like I do think the driving point is like look at what they did to them, right? But it's like you're revealing there is no surprise to it because you're revealing this to me within 15 minutes that the movie's going to be about how are we going to take this from them? So I know that the objective here isn't to like resonate with this character at all because from the get-go I know what they're, and I mean, like you said, this is a historical thing, so I know that they're going to take this from them. So it's very similar to other movies. You're like, the stakes were never high. I don't understand what the stakes were here because you're telling me from the get-go what's going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. And it's like, well, usually in some kind of perspective, like for example, I keep bringing up like Schindler's List, it's about the one little decency of thing that happened. And yes, the FBI come in here and they found out that all these people, but it never was addressed. And it's kind of like, well, now why do I know the name of the people who fucked these guys over? I don't think they should have any certain type of like, the book exists already. The names are out there, but now you've attached Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio to these characters who it's like.
Well, that is why, is because yes, the book exists and yes, it could be a New York Times bestseller, but movies will have a whole different outreach to people who are not going to read that book. And then yes, like, you know, you can't lie. Robert De Niro is a reason like your average person who likes movies might go see a movie, you know, and it's like, yeah, because Robert De Niro is this bad guy is why I know who he is. Not because I'm actually, this might be an even deeper one. It's like, not that I'm even actually interested in this. It's just that I will watch Robert De Niro be a bad guy or whatever, you know?
And then, yeah, I guess like that ends up like, because this movie is a much more serious matter, like in terms of being disappointed, walking out and being like, so how is this a benefit to the Osage people that this film was made for $242 million? To the most affected group here, I was like, how does this benefit them in any way?
I think just the fact that it, like, you have to start by acknowledging that this thing even happened. And it's like, most people are not even going to know that. So it's like, this takes a lot of groundwork that not one movie is going to like, well, there's no solving it. You know what I mean? Like,
No, like,
and
yeah,
I think
exactly.
that, cause like, I do think, and it's like, I'm not saying that I'm trying to tell you how to feel, but it's like a lot of your complaints and like frustration sound like, it's like, yeah, this is how frustrating this is in real life. You know what I mean? And it's like, and you would hope maybe the movie would give you something else, but it's like almost like a, not a reality check, but like I don't know. Like the ending to me was kind of like a, like I hate to break it to you, but even me making this movie is like nothing still in the grand scope of this whole thing. Like, and there is nothing to do to make this better. And like, I can tell you about it and I can make you aware that it happened. But even me doing that is like nowhere near enough because there is no such thing as like, there's no making this better. You know what I mean?
Because like the awareness thing to me, it's like, but the book exists. It's different if there was no book. If you're bringing up this story that nobody has made before, and you're addressing it like this story is literally, they only know it in you know.
Okay, well, would you say that about every historical book that's based on a true story that becomes a movie?
Well, because most movies, they get changed in terms of like there is a historical context why this movie is being made, this perspective, this untold story or made up story that ends up being like, isn't this what we wish happened or something? But like in this terms, like it has a different outreach, sure, but to who? We were talking about like, yeah, it's 242 million, and it's like, it's you know, like, let's say it's breaks even, or like, let's say it's make 100 million at the end.
It's not going to, probably.
But like, but what changed from this movie being made? Because it's like, if there was any change that came from it, it was from the book. It was from whoever the author or wherever this story resurfaced. But the making of this movie, how does it affect the Osage people at all? And I think that's obviously complaints that I've heard from Osage people, but there is Osage people who worked on it who.
I mean, in simple terms of who it's going to benefit is like Lily Gladstone will most likely or hopefully win an Oscar and go on to probably become a more popular actor. The Osage actors that are in this movie will probably go on to be in more movies. So it's like, not to be like, it's not like a politician here. Hey, he's creating jobs. Be like, but it does bring like an awareness to these people because it's like, this is going to sound awful, but it's like, there's a lot of people who don't even know these people exist. Like, and now they do. And like, and that alone is a an achievement that not that it sounds bad to say it because it's like it shouldn't need to happen, right? And this idea of like, oh well, the book, but it's like I don't know. So do you wish this movie didn't exist and just the book?
No, my point is what is the catalyst to make this movie? How does it benefit? Because it's a very sensitive topic.
He didn't decide to make this movie. This movie was like floating around. Like this is a movie that like, you know, it's not like he like seeked this out and was like, oh, I need to tell this story. It's like this is a movie that was going to get made, and then he was like, wait, I want to make this movie.
To be like, so every creative decision of in terms of how it should be portrayed was his then, like, so because he did choose to make Ernest the main character in his portrayal of the story, which is like that's kind of sets my point more because it's kind of like, well, so it's not like somebody told you should do it through this perspective. You thought for me to resonate most with the Osage people, it should be done through Ernest's point of view, which I just don't understand how that's supposed to.
Honestly think, the more I think about it, that the intention was to resonate with the Osage people.
Yeah, and then that's what I mean. It's kind of like, well, they're the most affected in this story. Like I don't think any of these actors are gonna be in any other movies personally. And Lily Gladstone could get nominated. I would want her to win, but if she doesn't, what then? Like I don't see how the Osage people, who are the most sensitive topic to talk about in this movie, really gained anything from this. Besides, like, yes, people knew their names, but the book existed. There's history books about all of these famous, Native American tribes existed. So I don't have this reason to think people who actually cared needed this movie to care. If the information has been out there,
I don't think that is the intention to make the people who already care more. I think it is to bring this to the masses.
Yeah, no, but like, and then that's my point. Like, bring this to the masses for what intention?
To show the evil, not to be like, hey, these were like really sick people who were done wrong.
No, I know, but to show the evil, yes, and then what's going to come of it? That's my point.
I wanted to bring this up earlier is that I think that this movie encapsulates everything about Martin Scorsese movies, and one of the big aspects of his film is like religion, right? And like the religious guilt. And I do think that that's like part of it is like acknowledging this and like feeling bad about it, not fucking like trying to tell it in any other way. Like for me, at least, that's what I feel like his intention is. Like I can't say that that's for sure or not, but like that's what it felt like to me. It was like I have to like, I, at least as Martin Scorsese, want to acknowledge this. And like, I think that's why the ending is the way it is too. And it's like, there is no happy ending for me to tell you. And like, it would be wrong of me to try to make a happy ending or to try to like, I don't know. It's so complicated, but like, that's just how I feel, at least, that for me, at least, that bringing it to the forefront and making it a popular story for the masses, because like it will become popular, like more than the book, most likely. Like the book will have done better numbers probably, but I do think that the movie will make it live in a way that the book just won't, or like the books don't.
Possibly. I mean, again, I think because but that in itself is commenting and also working in terms of the evil that is in this movie. Because, okay, if Lily Gladstone gets nominated, it'd be like either Robert De Niro or Leonardo DiCaprio is also going to get nominated. And they will most likely win because they're legends, right? And they're not persons of color. Apple gets another thing to add to their boom. We have another movie that won at the Oscars. Martin Scorsese has another great movie nominated. But what did the Osage people gain from this? I don't see anything that they gain from this. And it's kind of like this very delicate topic is not something most movies are made out of. So it's not usually a discussion like how did, the natives in Taika Waititi's movie, how did they because that's not really usually the case of something that's like again very sensitive, Aboriginals, right? But it's like usually it's not this situation. But here it's like you have this multi-million-dollar movie, and I don't see in any way how the Osage have gained anything besides, again, people profiting from their story.
So you think this is an exploitative movie at the end of the day?
The creative choices that were taken here, I don't think, like you said, they weren't made to be like, I'm going to show you their pain or that. So I find that very weird because you chose to make this material. So to me, it's a very like, in itself, the thing it's making fun of is what it is. And I find that I don't think I've ever felt like that in any situation before where, and Once Upon a Time, they kind of talked about, sure, maybe Sharon Tate and her family, I feel like this is fucked up to make, or, another one like Elvis, for example, and Priscilla, right? Like how Elvis' estate does not, but that's what happened. Those are the things that happened, but they're very like, they're not as sensitive as this is. Like races weren't exterminated because of this. So it's like, this is like a big thing about like, it's the same thing as like, why are they all really good slave movies? Like it's always like, movies where a lot of black characters have won Oscars are slave movies. Just like at the end of the day, the only thing that's seen as like, oh, this is really like important is exploitation. And it's kind of like, you said it yourself, like, why is there not more Native Americans movies that don't have to do about this? Why is it that they're not nominated in a movie like, like in How to Blow Up a Pipeline? A lot of one of the main characters is Native American. Is he going to win anything for that? No, because it's not going to translate to that in terms of, oh, you know what, now all these Native Americans, like, we're going to put them in movies. Lily Gladstone, sure. But she was like, it's not like she was completely unknown before this. Like, yes, she said she wanted to not do this, and like she wanted to quit. But there's a reason Martin Scorsese put her in the movie. It's not like she's completely like a nobody. So it's like, okay, somebody who is already getting some type of recognition might get some more, sure. But the Osage people, what did they gain from this?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and it's like, but your complaints, it's like there is no answer to your complaints.
No, there's not.
So I don't. That's why I'm like, where do you fall on this? So like you don't. Not that you have to make the decision, but it's like, do you? So you like this movie, but you also think it's like extremely exploitative.
It's a good movie, but the problem is that like the subject matter is not a movie.
So can a movie like this not be exploitative? Like even
I don't think it can.
Okay, so then it shouldn't exist. Like I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or like start an argument or anything like that, but I'm just trying to. What is the through line here? So this movie is very good, but it is exploitative.
Yeah.
And should exploitative movies not exist, or movies by their nature cannot not be exploitative?
Well, in this term, okay, like for this one, like for example,
so is there someone who could have handled this rightly? Like
how
even an Osage director would have handled this.
How is this not better suited if it was a documentary?
Oh, well, I mean, you could say that about a lot of stuff, though. Like especially historical things. The Napoleon movie that's coming out. How would that not just be better as a documentary?
They're dead. All those people are dead.
Well, all these people are dead except for a very few of them.
They're not though. Like you're just telling me that a lot of like the grandson of this guy is alive.
Yeah, but if 10,000 people is not a lot compared to fucking 20, 50 million.
But like you said earlier in the episode, like Oklahoma people who have money know that they came from this. Yeah. So these people are alive.
Well, I mean, Ernest Burkhart died in 1986.
That's why like it's like all of these things that they drew out of, that the book drew out of, there was some facts to it. There's some FBI. So there's like certain topics like you could never duplicate with the movie. It's like Richard Ramirez, whenever they're going to make the movie, be like, is that as intense as the actual thing that happened? No, it's not. And guess what? Because it's highly sensitive. Because a lot of people, they lost loved ones in this thing. So this specifically in its nature is very exploitative, because I do think it's like, it's not like this is being made by an Osage director and like they're getting all the profits and now we're going to like, it's not. Apple is getting this money and they're not going to get any awards. It's not like, oh, you got an Oscar, so guess what? Now people are coming to the Osage, whatever it is that they have in their property, and then you know, there's a bunch of people now here. I don't see how this film is going to affect them in any way. And then for this specific topic that you chose to make this movie, I think that's a very like a big remark, because not every movie is made about a topic like this. So it's like a very unique to its situation. And like, is it a well-made movie? Yes, but I do find it not as sensitive as I thought it should have been. So I guess that's the driving force here. Is I think this is a very well-made movie, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to enjoy it, because I didn't feel like the trailer exactly gave me what I thought the movie was going to be. And it's like, well, I did think that there was going to be perspectives from Molly that grounded me and gave me that, that emotional pain that they were supposed to have as people. But I didn't feel that. And
I've been wanting to ask you about, because we've kind of dodged this the whole episode, but it is an interesting comparison because it's a similar subject matter. We talked about it earlier, is Oppenheimer, of the outcry that was there from the Japanese people and basically just laughed out of the room, right? And like, no. Like, why do you think this is so different?
Oppenheimer is the title Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
It's about a person.
Yeah.
It's about the scientist. It's about a Jew who built a bomb in terms of trying to save his people. The U.S. obviously completely took that to another extent, and this became, again, another fucking, like, we're going to use this. The U.S. is going to use this as a way to further our name in the world, to be like, so that in itself was, like, that story of Oppenheimer being exposed like that and being used to that way is shared in several books, but there's never any adaptation of what it would be like to be in the head of Oppenheimer. So there is no direct, like, oh, Nolan bit this off of one book.
There's the book American Prometheus, which it's based on. Right?
That's what I'm saying, but it's several books. It's not just completely, I took this book and did the whole book. It's this story of the apple. Nobody knows if it's true or not. They were mad about that. They'd be like, why did you include that? Because it's a story that was told. You know what I mean? It'd be like, so a lot of it ends up being like, there is nothing exploitative about that movie because he doesn't show the Japanese how they ended up looking. He just even shows it to you in slideshows, Oppenheimer seeing it. But it's
so
like
the people who did want to see that, because like that is one of the complaints for that movie, right? Like even Spike Lee, he's like, Christopher Nolan's made some of the best movies of all time. He knows exactly what he's doing, but I, for one, would have liked to see that. You know what I mean? Like, to not include that almost feels like not that you like Oppenheimer. It's funny to be like that he like backs Oppenheimer, but it's like, I don't know, maybe gives him like, because the ending of Oppenheimer is not open-ended in any way. It ends with the medal ceremony, right? Of like, hey, well, they've kind of fucked him over, but he's still an American hero at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the driving force of what Albert Einstein tells him is, that ends up being like, again, a connection to that's what humans do in terms of not wanting to feel guilty. And it's funny that you bring that up because that is what we're seeing here. It's like they will take from you, and then they will make everybody think that you did wrong. And then they will give you a medal and tell you like, sorry that we did that to you. And I hope everything feels better. Be like, there's nothing you could give me anymore that is going to ever bring that back to me. All of that shame, all of that loss, all of that emotional. And it's like this movie being made about such a sensitive topic again. It's like, well, you're bringing this up. You're rehashing this pain. How are you going to in any way fix this? And you can't. Obviously that you can't. Or obviously like everything seems to be like, oh, so you're going to donate money, right? But that's never going to be really something that is viable. But it's a start, I think. But it's like this movie is being made, and I don't see like the reason why at all it's going to benefit the people that it mostly is talking about in this movie. Which, yeah, like Oppenheimer, I think Christopher Nolan understands it. Be like showing the Japanese and what happens. Go look at the pictures. Go look at the documentary. I'm not going to make it for you to see because guess what? Be like, that's so sensitive. I'm not going to show you that. Go look, go read the books, go read the first-hand accounts of these things happening. And so I be like, that is a very driving force to me because Oppenheimer remains my favorite movie of the year, but it has to do with that. I do think it's very taken. It's the opposite of this. It's taken with care to people that did end up suffering from this and understands that I'm telling you this story from a person who was conflicted, but there was people who his decisions affected very like a whole other race or a time in history, and I think it understands that, and it does treat it better than I think this movie does.
So do you think like at the end of your like in your heart of hearts that Martin Scorsese did not do right by the Osage people?
I don't think so. I think like you could have advisors, and what is the advisor supposed to say? No, Martin, don't do it that way. You think you're right. I should do it this other way. No, he's not going to.
That is how it has been portrayed. Is like obviously not that they're writing the thing, but that's like he took deeply into account the things that they've said.
Yeah, I mean, I I've seen both sides. You know what I mean? Like I've seen Osage just seem to be like kind of what you're saying. Be like the fact that you guys know this is only one of our stories and the pain that we felt. We acknowledge that this is great that you guys now know this, you know, and the world can now understand. But I've also heard be like this is exploitative as hell. Like there's nothing that we're gaining. Like what I'm getting at is like the same thing. Like that's what I've heard. I'm not completely just taking this off of like, obviously it becomes like very personal if I put myself in the shoes. Like, well, I didn't feel like, and I think that comes due to expectations. Like I just am talking based off the expectations. But when you do see that some of the complaints, what I think are the most important demographic in this movie, I don't think he did well by them. And it sucks because it's like being given hand to be like, it's a start though. Right. And it's like, well, no, fuck you. Like, what do you mean it's a start? It's the same shit that you're giving to me. At least we're acknowledging it, right? But it's like, well, that doesn't. What does that do for them? Like, I don't think it does anything for them. You know?
I mean, I get it, but like, what do you want them to get out of it? Like, I guess that's a better question. Like, what should they have gotten out of this movie?
I think it would be like there should be.
Like, I'm not trying to ask you to rewrite history here, but like, for your complaints, have you thought of what you would have preferred to see or how it was handled? Like,
well, I just think, like, for example, the perspective if it's made through Molly and you actually give me the names of all of these Native Americans that played an integral part and got screwed over, I would probably care more than know Ernest's name or know Robert De Niro's character's name. I don't know any of the Native Americans' name, and it's not like they made that like, sure, I know Molly's sister's names, and it's but exactly, but what about every other person lived there and every other person that got screwed over and all this hierarchy that we were shown? There's no me showing me more of that. I don't feel like enough respect towards that culture. Or like, it's not like I ended walking out be like, dang, that's cool that the Osage do that. Like, it just felt like, okay, so yes, Native Americans do that, but I know that they are very unique. Yes, I ended up learning, yeah, because they cracked into oil. They were very rich. But besides that, do I know any of their practices that they did? No, I don't. Everything else that they did was very general Native American, quote unquote Indian, as they say here, like practices. And I don't end up feeling like I walked out being like, oh, these people have been shown how they were betrayed. They were taken advantage of. It did end up just feeling like they knew what was going to happen and they just completely went with it. And they were surprised by it, and there was some white guilt here, and that's it. And it's kind of like, well, why is there any of the white guilt there at all? Because I don't think they had any guilt at all in them. And like you said, like the Osage are saying, be like, oh, you got to show like the love that they have between them. But I don't think the movie shows that either. So that's how I was like, well, if you're trying to convince me that they were in love because of the situation that they're in, this movie doesn't do that. And like the book apparently very well portrays that she did feel very like betrayed and never did think it was him that was behind all of this. And the movie doesn't show that. So I'm like, the book at least understands to show me that Molly's pain comes through like all of these people's deaths just come through her people because they have money. But the movie, it's like you said, it's just focused on her sisters. And it ends up feeling like the pain that this is happening is because her sisters are dying. But it's like, no, a lot of that is ungrievable to most people because it's like, no, your culture is dying. They're wiping it out. You're exterminated. And I didn't feel like those extremes were really properly and like addressed, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, all of your complaints are valid. Not going to sit here and argue with you about them. I just don't have the same ones you do, or not to the extent that you do, obviously. We should probably wrap it up pretty soon because the episode is getting extremely long. We don't want the episode to be as long as the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't tell, I guess our mileage does vary on how much we like this movie, but that a movie like this comes along not very often, to the point where it could even warrant this much discourse and this much talking about it. Most movies are not even worth talking about for this long, let alone even having deep conversations about, to be honest. And like, we try to talk about the ones that we do feel, do that. And I think that this movie even though you may like Oppenheimer more, I do feel like the discussions that will happen around this movie are going to be like a longer lasting impact on like how like what the future of cinema has in store for it. You know what I mean? It's like, does anything change? Maybe it does. Like I don't know. Maybe I don't have such a negative view going forward of like what happens after this movie, because it doesn't seem like you have a very positive outlook for the post Flower Moon world of movies.
Well,
Right?
I mean, I just think nothing's gonna happen. I don't think that's positive or negative. I just think it's not gonna change anything. Which is like a movie that's worth 200.
I mean, don't you think it's negative when things don't change that are not good?
I mean, I don't think like you said, I don't think his intention was to change anything. It's
Okay, but I'm not saying his intention was like, I will personally change things. But if things change, you know, Hollywood, like this is the thing, is like, I know you're like, oh, it's exploitative or whatever. It's like Hollywood is exploitative. You're never going to get around that. So if this movie is popular and does make enough money and does have enough awards buzz, you will start to see more movies about maybe not the exact same thing, but similar subject matter, because it's going to be like, oh, well, we want to make our Oppenheimer, or we want to make our Killers of the Flower Moon, or anything like that, right? And yeah, usually people do learn the wrong lessons, but I am optimistic that there will be some good that comes out of a movie like this.
because I for example think about like the movie Wind River. Great movie, phenomenal movie about Native Americans getting fucked over. You know, I don't think anybody really remembers that.
Honestly,
movie.
Wind River is what the Wind River is kind of what this movie would have been in its original iteration of like the story of this white man going to Indian country to solve a crime. Like that was Wind River. So
Yeah,
that
is
movie
Wind
does
River.
exist.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's like. Movies like this have existed, and there is no change of discourse. It's not like all of a sudden Marlon Brando put a Native American up there to take, and they laughed him out.
Because I mean, Wind River, as much as I like that movie for the quality of it and the tension of it, you want to talk about sensitivity. Be like, the Native American girl is just there to get raped and killed. That's it. Be like, and then like she's not even a character. She's there for 5 minutes, you know, and it's like Jeremy Renner is the hero and Elizabeth Olsen is the hero of that movie. It just takes place on Native American land, you know.
Yeah, but again, happened more than likely, but not specifically that situation. So it's not like you're like, damn, I can't believe they showed my aunt getting just, that's it, that's all she was. It's just a story that was drawn up to prove a point, which was that for that movie at least, it was like, it does have to, I don't specifically remember what the tie-in was with Native Americans, that it was happening in a reservoir. I remember that, but I don't even think the point
reservation
was that, I don't even think it was, the point was that this is still effects of them getting fucked over. I think that just was
that
more.
Was just like, hey, this
is happening in a reservation.
Interesting backdrop.
Yeah. So it's like, again, be like not based on any specific national tragedy or erased history. It's just a story that was come up with.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, those are that's what I'm saying. Like this movie has that difference where this is like, you're making a movie about the Trail of Tears. Like, okay, so why do you want to address this? You know, because it's like there is various accounts of how terrible this was. So what is this movie going to change? Or like, that's the problem with the people have with 12 Years a Slave, right? Like what was the
most
point?
of these slave movies?
Yeah.
It's like always like, oh, you know, maybe the guy who owned him wasn't so bad after all. And actually he taught him how to read. I'm like, okay, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So obviously those are extremely like, you know.
Yeah, or you know, it was actually good when the white guy drove the black guy around in the time when black people weren't allowed to go to certain places. Like, yeah. Great, lovely. Which is funny because it's like I don't think that this movie falls in line with movies like that. I think it's its own beast, to be honest. I can't think of another movie like this, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd have to think about it for a bit. I mean, it's certain, you know, characters that are completely evil, and they were historically accurate, and you do end up, yeah, I guess like I did end up thinking of Neutrum, right? It's like, you know what this person ends up doing, so it's not like you end up feeling the whole time of the movie like the movie is telling you, but you know he's a complicated character. So again, based off of an event that happened, I feel like the movie very easily addressed this motherfucker is crazy. And I want you guys to understand that this is an extreme of evil, and this was very, very detrimental. At the end of the movie, guns were outlawed because of this very terrible thing. But it's like here, obviously, because that is his stagnant point, is that he's saying this was never even brought up again. When she died, the people he even wrote her obituary, she was just another Native American that died. And isn't that even more tragic that no change happened because of this? Yes, it is. And like, so what change is going to happen now? None. Just Apple's going to make money off of this story. Like, isn't that the same thing as the horror? I mean, as the true crime podcast?
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think though that it's like if nothing is going to happen, then what was the point of making it?
Because the book exists. Like, it is because it's like, well, this story exists already. So why did you make this movie? Because, like, for example, if you want to compare it to other people who drop books that aren't exactly like things that happen, Stanley Kubrick took The Shining because he's like, I see this in it, and he changed this in it, and this is why I'm making The Shining how I want to make it, because this is my message about this theme. It's like, oh, okay, that makes complete sense to me. He, as somebody who always wrote from books, he changed it because this is how I see my theme that I think this book is hitting home. This is how I think it should be better addressed. Again, it comes from fantasy, so this is why Stanley Kubrick made this movie. This is why, John Carpenter made Carrie, because this is how he read. But this is based off of something that happened, something that's already accounted for. So it does end up becoming like, why did you think putting this in earnest perspective has a story that needed to be told? And I don't think
I just think it's because he didn't want to make the same crime procedural that, exists in the world. Like, that's a common movie. And it's like, he changed the story, but it's still a real thing that happened. It's not like he's just changing the perspective of the story from like, well, I don't think it's that interesting or would be that interesting if it was just told through the eyes of the FBI. Like, it'd probably be an even more insensitive movie than it already is, because the driving plot would be like, well, we're only here because they gave us $20,000, be like, so that's not better or worse, like they're two totally different views on the same story. And, and it's like, sure, that writer decided it was cool to do like a FBI story. Cause I mean, like when you look at the book, the cover, it's like Killers of the Flower Moon. It's like the Osage murders and the birth of the FBI, and it's like, that's even that book is like, yes, while it could probably do some things better, it's still more interested in the birth of the FBI than it is the actual Osage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I will say that Martin Scorsese thought the book was good enough portraying what he thought he should put on film enough. So obviously I don't think he feels that the book is exploitative in any way, because he decided to make the movie based off the book. Like, I could feel that way, that the book is exploitative at least, but he didn't. He is like, I'm going to, like you said, like they told him like, this is something we want to do. He read the book and was like, oh, this is what he took from it. And he took that Ernest's character was the most like, this is the most interesting perspective I could pick to make this story from. And it's like, well, I guess like if you could choose to rewrite and pick, that's who you pick to do it from. And obviously he makes the movies with those type of characters. He still put elements of, mobster movies in this. There's scenes here with no arms or like with no hands, just sitting there. He's going to make the movie that he's like most known for making. I get that. But it's also like, okay, well, that creative decision of yours, I think, is very insensitive to who the main character of this movie should be. Because at least in the FBI files, like I said in the book, it's like at least you understand that she is taken aback by like, oh, fuck, it was him the whole time. But here it's just like it ended up feeling like she just rode with it. Because she knew from the get-go that he was a coyote, and she just rode with it. And this happened. Like, okay, but what happened in real life wasn't justice. So what is in this story, since you decided to change the perspective of it, why did you make it an Ernest's? Is it to show again?
I think the fact that there's no justice, and then like the ending really cements that home. Then it's like no justice. King Hill went to prison for 2 years, then died on his ranch of cancer. Ernest Burkhart returned to the land and just died there in 1986. Probably broke as fuck, whatever. Like, in Molly died of at 50 years old, like most Osage people did at that time. And it's like, there is no justice here. So I don't know what you want me. What do you want me to give you? Like,
no, nothing.
And it's like, and yeah, it's like, I don't know. Like, I didn't feel like the quietness of her performance when the betrayal is revealed, I thought said a lot. Like, I didn't think it needed to be, I don't know, maybe played up more or harped on more or anything like that. Like,
you can't tell me she's surprised based off of the movie when the movie's telling you from the beginning she's calling him a coyote. So you can't tell me that ending scene of her being quiet comes off to you as being surprised when she's telling you 20 minutes into the movie that she knows he's trying to take his money?
Well, I don't think she's that surprised. Like, I mean, I think she is, but also, like, I don't think the movie's like, oh my God, you know? And it's like,
but through the accounts of what happened in real life, she really was surprised. That's my point. I was like, so if in real life she was very thrown
I understand that, but just because someone is really surprised, like, you don't know how they actually expressed that. You know what I mean? It's like, so the book could make it seem like she's hooting and hollering, and Martin Scorsese decided to take a more quiet angle to her betrayal. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's you can pick your preference for what you like, right? But it's like, who would actually know exactly how she reacted, right?
Well, I don't have issues with the expressionism. I'm just saying the story never led me to believe that she would have any reason to not see this coming. Her being quiet, I'm not saying that that's not surprising. Like, that's not the point that I'm getting at. I'm saying that the way that this was written for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, she knew 20 minutes in that he was someone she shouldn't trust. And then at the end of the movie, that's just what happens. What she thought was going to happen. We talked about
this earlier in the episode, though, was that, yes, she knew it was a coyote, but that, well, I thought we had kind of, I don't know, maybe you didn't feel this way, but like, I thought we had established it's like, yeah, she loved him and she knew he wanted the money, but she didn't know exactly how evil, how deeply this goes, you know? And it's like, that is the flaw in her character, or like as a person, I guess. It feels weird to say because you're talking about a real person who actually married somebody, and to tell them like, you're not saying it this way, but it's like in the harshest terms, it's like, you're an idiot, you don't see this coming. And it's like judging someone for a real choice that they actually made. It's like Martin Scorsese, whether he picked that angle or not, he didn't write that choice of her being like, why would you marry someone you don't trust?
He wrote how this was revealed, though. That's what I'm getting at. It's like not the point that you're getting at. I'm getting that he wrote this character. And in the book, it's based off of literally how she found out. So she was more surprised to find out that the way that she was being poisoned.
So does she not find out in court the way that the movie says it?
From what I understand, no. The way that the movie ended, like, that's not how she found out. Like, so it was later through the investigation that the FBI made, but it's not that way. And it's like, well, it seems like it would be the most integral thing to show when the person who's been done over the worst is how she finds out. And I don't think that it's like in this, it just ends up feeling like she reaffirms that, oh, I was right the whole time. But in real life, because what you're saying, she just wasn't a character. In real life, she was very surprised to find out it was him. And I'm not saying to be like, why did you marry? I'm pretty sure she didn't know he was this evil from the get-go. Yes, she knew he was white. Yes, her mom would tell her, be like, oh, he's going to take your money. But I don't think for the get-go that he was this fucking stupid and brazen about it. And in the movie, since it's so obvious from the get-go, I'm like, why is it written this way? When I know he rewrote it. So that's what I'm getting at, is that he rewrote this a certain way. And I think it literally takes away the biggest thing, which is her surprise at the end of how he was a piece of shit to her. Because it was surprising to her, that's where the tragedy is. But like in this whole movie, she knows 20 minutes in. And I'm like, and then at the end, I'm supposed to believe in her quietness that she was like, damn, I was right. But it's like, well, that seems like she was very complacent with her pain. Like, no, she was very surprised by this. She did not expect that her husband of years was the one betraying her. And so then that to me has been like, because I'm like, that also reflects on like the Osage. Yeah, like, you know, his uncle was disguised this whole time. Like, we respect you very much. They were heavily betrayed and did not think he was the one behind all of it. That reflects in each other very well. But I don't think the movie really, that was completely lost in how to change the perspective. And that's why I think that's what I'm saying. Like, that is my biggest complaint of the movie, is that his change in perspective completely took that part of the book, which I think is the most important thing in this very sensitive topic.
I see. All right. Well, I think we should probably end it because this conversation kind of seems like it will probably never end about our differing views on this movie. So obviously, I think if you're listening this far, how have you could have went and saw the movie already.
Yeah.
So you should definitely watch that. Check it out on Apple TV or in the theaters if you get a chance. Definitely IMAX if you can't see it on the biggest screen possible. It demands it. For the 3.5 hour runtime, don't be a baby. Maybe don't drink a giant soda in the middle of this movie. You know, I don't know. I didn't do that as someone who drinks a ton of beverages during a movie, you know, like I kind of pace myself. Or if you always want to go the James Cameron route, the ultimate chat answer, get up and go pee. It's fine. You'll see that scene the next time you watch my movie, which is pretty baller answer, right? It's like, I know you're going to see this twice, so just go pee.
True.
I love that. I really do love that. Because I think that's the best argument I've heard about discourse, right? It's like, just go fucking pee. And you'll watch it again. I know you will.
True.
Oh, what a good answer. So The Latest and Greatest by Martin Scorsese, go check it out. He is a patron saint of the arts and he must be protected at all costs. And I wonder how much you'll hate his next movie, because his next movie is based on another novel by David Grand, but I don't think it is a, as for the historical fiction, nonfiction, I'm not sure, but Leonardo DiCaprio, and it's going to be set on the open seas. So I guess we'll see next time. God, hopefully in the next 2 years or something, right? Let's get that right away. The train keeps on rolling. Next week, next episode, Alvaro, I ask you here, Possession or Back to the Wes Anderson?
This is post Halloween already, right?
No, this will be out before Halloween. So there is time. I mean, there's also a ton of other movies coming out.
I don't know if I can make the decision on here.
All right. Well, possibly one more spooky season surprise for you guys. I made a playlist on the YouTube channel, by the way, if you want to check out the spooky season scary episodes. There's 33 horror episodes, so there's plenty to dig through there. Check it out. It's called the Halloween playlist, I believe. Something like that.
Over 33 hours.
Yeah, over 33 hours. Yeah, exactly. Check that out, and we'll be back next week. And I can almost guarantee it won't be as good as this movie. Whatever it is.
True.
So, thank you as always. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.